Hero of the Otherworldly Castle. This video is purely for entertainment and does not infringe on copyrights or laws. The rights to the novel and image belong to the original author. We do not claim ownership. Don't like waiting and want to listen to this fanfic in full now? Subscribe to our Patreon, where you'll find the best fanfics. Chapter 301, When the War Begins. After all the generals and commanders left the tent, Lurk asked Li Jing, "General Li, are you sure of winning tomorrow's battle?" Military advisor Lurk, "You are joking. How can there be a sure win battle? We generals are just trying our best." Hearing this, Li Jing smiled bitterly and shook his head, saying, "There is only an 80% chance of winning. General Li is too modest. In my opinion, it is not easy for our army to have an 80% chance of winning tomorrow's battle." Lurk is an expert in military affairs. He knows that an 80% chance of winning is the result of the greatest human effort. The remaining 2 chances depend on God's will. The enemy army on the opposite side is not an ordinary one. After so many years of fighting, they must have accumulated a lot of combat experience and trained an elite army. More importantly, the number of people is large, which is more than 4 times and nearly 5 times the number of the Zaire army. Moreover, it is on the plane, not on the natural moat. The number of people largely offsets the technical advantage of the Zaire army, but it is only to a large extent. The war technology that is separated by who knows how many generations cannot be offset by relying solely on the number of people. In any case, Lurk and Li Jing could fully imagine that tomorrow's decisive battle would be an extremely difficult battle. On the Baxter side, Knight Commander Ian also ordered his knights with a serious face. In tomorrow's battle, the slave army will attack first, and the first army will follow behind to supervise the battle. If the slaves escape, they will be executed on the spot. Yes, Lord Knight Commander. After the knights of the slave army and the first army received the order, Ian continued to order, the second army will launch an encirclement from the north, and the third army will launch an attack from the south. The knights will follow this knight commander to act together. Yes. In addition to the 50,000 slave army, the 120,000 troops of Baxter also have a knight group of 10,000 people. The remaining 60,000 infantry are divided into 3 legions of 20,000 each. The 10,000 knights are not really 10,000 knights. In fact, there are less than 100 real knights, and the rest are all cavalry called knight apprentices. This is what Ian has accumulated for Baxter's expeditions to the east and west. 3 infantry legions of 20,000 people. Each legion has 5,000 archers, 8,000 spearmen, 2,000 battle axemen, and 5,000 other types of soldiers, such as shield soldiers and siege equipment soldiers. The slaves of the slave legion have all kinds of weapons. In fact, these slave soldiers were used for consumption at the beginning, so all the weapons and equipment came from the enemy. According to past habits, fortunately, the slaves can still keep the weapons and equipment they need after seizing them, otherwise these slaves can only die. And the 50,000 slave army of Baxter basically has a weapon in hand, and some leaders even have 1 or 2 pieces of iron hanging on their bodies. From this, it can be seen that all the slaves of this slave army have come down from the battlefield. Of course, it is not to say that these slaves are so brave and fearless of death, but it is related to the fact that the enemies these slaves have encountered in the past are not very powerful. Basically they are in a favorable situation. Otherwise Baxter would not be able to retain a 50,000 slave army. Knights, tomorrow's battle depends on you. After the victory, this knight will definitely ask the monarch for credit for you. Ian finally encouraged his subordinates. He knew that defending the homeland and protecting civilians were all empty talk, and only real reputation was what these knights wanted. "I obey your orders, Lord Knight." As expected, when these knights heard Ian's words, they became excited and eager to try. The day of the decisive battle arrived as scheduled. When the first ray of sunlight in the morning shone on the earth, the armies of both sides were all lined up, waiting for the moment of war. On the Baxter National Army side, Fang Zheng, the largest but also scattered, was at the forefront of the entire army. The knight asked his men to shout loudly and turn to encourage them. "Slaves, the knight commander has ordered that, as long as you kill a Zaire soldier, you can restore your civilian status. Kill 2 to obtain the status of a soldier. Kill 3 to be promoted to a squad leader. Kill 5 to obtain the status of a knight apprentice or a squadron leader. The knights of the first legion behind the slave army were also shouting, but the content was completely different. Warriors, do you see the slaves in front? You must keep a close eye on them. Anyone who turns around and runs away will be killed. If these slaves run away, you will replace the slave soldiers and rush to the front. The legions on both sides also had their own pre-war encouragement, either inducement or coercion. As long as these soldiers can rush up and launch an attack, the knights will use any means. On the Xia Kingdom side, the entire army, from legion to the soldiers, did not say anything extra, but just quietly waited for the sound of the drums and horns. Prepare for battle. Attack. It was unknown how long it had been, but when the entire golden sun disk jumped out of the horizon, the two armies basically issued the order to start the war at the same time. The knights of the slave army, riding on wildebeests, received Ian's order to attack, and immediately issued an attack order to the 50,000 slave soldiers. The slave army begins to attack. Charge. Kill. On the hill behind the Xia army, Li Jing also issued an order to start the war. Beat the war drums. Blow the horns. Dang 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 woo woo woo. When the war drums sounded and the horns blew, the army below also heard their own orders. Cavalry brigade. Head northwest, charge with this general. The cavalry brigade, which had already formed an arrow formation, launched a charge towards the edge of the enemy army under the order of Huo Kwabeng. Imperial Guards. It's time to serve the king. Let these northern barbarians see what an invincible army is. Zhao Wu rode on his warhorse, listening to the sound of war drums and horns behind him, and his blood seemed to burn. Prepare the artillery. Not only Zhao Wu, but even an ordinary soldier of the Xia Kingdom, at this moment, his blood was boiling, watching the charging enemy approaching quickly, and they all clenched their weapons. Brothers, prepare to fight. Prepare the artillery. The king of the regular brigade did not say much, but this prepare for battle has made the soldiers of the regular brigade act with confidence. Artillery is the most powerful weapon of the Xia Kingdom army and the first weapon to launch an attack. No matter what battle it faces, artillery is always the first to speak to the enemy. Li Jing looked at the expected slave army and rushed to the front, which made him feel a little relieved. The distance of the enemy's charge was getting closer and closer, and Li Jing counted silently in his heart, and his eyes became more and more sharp. At the moment, when the enemy broke through an invisible line, Li Jing's eyes were determined, and he gave a stern order. Order the entire army. Fire. Chapter 302 Battle of Muyan. Fire. The order to fire was heard from a high hill. Boom, boom, boom. The rhythm of the war drums suddenly changed, becoming very rapid, as if chasing and shocking something. Woo, woo, woo. The horn sounded again, but unlike before, this time the horn sounded rapid and powerful, as if warning and alerting something. Boom, boom, boom. As the order was issued, the gunpowder smoke from the cannons in front of the battle array caused a white smoke to float in front of the Xia Kingdom's position, making the entire army formation hazy, as if the heavenly soldiers and generals had descended to earth. Except for the cavalry brigade that was not equipped with artillery, because of the need for mobility, the other two brigades plus a battalion all had artillery. A total of 150 field artillery pieces, and a salvo of 70 siege guns, that is, 220 shells flew towards the enemy. But compared to the numerous enemy troops, this firepower was still a bit stretched. For the enemy's 50,000 slave soldiers, on average, only more than 200 people were allocated one artillery shell. Boom boom boom. High explosive shells exploded one after another in the enemy's formation, and while rising balls of flames, they also sent the enemy's soldiers flying into the air. Even though the enemy's slave soldiers suffered casualties, they were also shocked by the power of Xia's weapons. However, because Xia had used artillery many times, the enemy was prepared and launched an attack regardless of the consequences. Before the two armies started fighting, the distance between each other was about 3 kilometers. The Xia army waited until the enemy rushed to 800 or 900 meters before launching artillery fire, calculated according to the firing rate of 3 rounds per minute for field artillery and 2 rounds per minute for siege artillery. In the process of the enemy rushing from 900 meters to 300 meters, it was enough for Zaya's field artillery to launch 5 to 6 rounds of artillery fire, and siege artillery to launch 3 to 4 rounds of artillery fire. The attack method of Zaya's artillery was not only to use shrapnel shells. In field battles, the regulations for siege artillery are that shrapnel is used at a distance of 1000 meters, solid bullets are used between 1000 meters and 300 meters, and shotgun is used within 300 meters, and there is only one chance to fire. So at the beginning of the attack, the siege artillery is directly placed flat, and solid bullets are used to plow dozens of flesh and blood channels in the enemy's charge array, and as the distance of the enemy army is shortened, the power of the attack will increase. Field artillery also has combat regulations, that is, shrapnel is used at a distance of 600 meters, solid bullets are used between 300 meters and 600 meters, and shotgun is used within 300 meters. Therefore, the logistics of the Zaya Kingdom allocates more solid bullets for siege artillery, more shrapnel for field artillery, and the least shotgun. In the process of the enemy's charge, the artillery does not need the generals to give orders at all. The commanding officers know when to use what shells, unless the generals have other plans and issue detailed instructions. Ranged infantry, start attacking. Melee infantry, advance. After a round of shotgun shells cleared a large area of enemy troops in front, Deking and Zawu took advantage of the short period of time when the enemy was in a panic to promptly order the infantry to advance. As the order to attack was issued, the crossbowmen and archers began to shoot, and the melee soldiers crossed the artillery positions in neat steps to the sound of drums, set up heavy shields, and raised their spears. The sword and shield soldiers also raised round shields to provide protection for the heads of the crossbowmen and spearmen around them to prevent the enemy's arrows from falling from the sky. The heavy infantry gathered together and prepared behind the sword and shield soldiers, ready to attack at any time. Their heavy armor did not need any defense at all. The artillery positions were originally set up on the slope, so they could attack the enemy from a high position. When the infantry on the hillside crossed the artillery positions, the artillerymen reloaded the shrapnel shells and launched a continuous attack on the enemy behind the front line. Li Jing watched from the top of the hill as the enemy lost at least 8 or 9,000 people under the artillery attack. Before the close combat, the enemy's vanguard lost 1/5 of its troops, especially the round of shotgun volleys at 300 meters, which caused the enemy to lose at least 2 or 3,000 people. This was also the reason why the enemy was in chaos for a moment. No matter who saw the comrades in front of them turned into blood and flesh with a loud bang, they would be panicked. But there were still too many enemy troops behind them. This loss was only a small part of the enemy, not to mention the regular troops behind the enemy. Even the 50,000 slave troops still had more than 30,000 people. Order, long-range infantry and artillery to suspend the attack. Order, cavalry to charge. While the enemy's formation became sparse under the attack of artillery, Zhao Wu ordered the entire heavy cavalry battalion of the Imperial Guard, 1,500 heavy cavalry, and the entire brigade of 900 light cavalry, to launch a counterattack against the enemy. At the same time, Deking next to him also issued the same order, but the regular brigade only had 1,200 light cavalry, and no heavy cavalry. Fortunately, the enemy's offensive focus was on Zhao Wu's Imperial Guards. This was one of the reasons why Li Jing put the regular brigade on the left wing. After the order was issued, the cavalry launched a charge from the passage of the army formation. A total of 1,500 heavy cavalry, 2,100 light cavalry, and a total of 3,600 cavalry launched a counterattack against the sparse enemy. The distance of just 200 or 300 meters was just enough for the cavalry to speed up and exert the power of the charge. When the cavalry launched the charge, the artillery also suspended the attack in order to cause accidental injuries, and the artillery took the opportunity to cool down the heated artillery. The chaotic enemy in front could not stop the cavalry's charge at all. The 3-shot crossbow of the light cavalry also fired at the dense enemy during the charge. When the cavalry rushed into the enemy formation, the enemy soldiers blocking the cavalry's war horses were knocked away. When the soldiers fell, they were soft and had no life. Just like a sharp steel knife cutting through a piece of tofu, there was not even a trace of resistance. The enemy was cut into pieces by the cavalry of Zaya. Even if the infantry who were ready for battle were attacked by the cavalry, they had to be prepared for heavy losses. 3,600 cavalrymen must have at least 5 times more infantry to resist head-on. Not to mention that the slave army in front of Zaire had been attacked by artillery repeatedly. How could such a military formation stop the charge of the cavalry? Soon the cavalry killed the enemy's slave army. Seeing the many enemy troops waiting in battle behind them, the cavalry of Zaire wisely turned their horses around and killed back from the slave army. After the cavalry's back and forth attack, especially the attack launched from behind the enemy, when the cavalry returned to the front line, there were only less than 20,000 slave soldiers left in the front line of the 50,000. During the battle, Li Jing did not intervene in the battle in front except for ordering the artillery to attack at the beginning of the war and let Deking and Zhao Wu play their roles. Standing on the hill, he watched the two brigades below working in perfect harmony and assisting each other, causing the enemy's vanguard to collapse in an instant. He nodded with great satisfaction. Chapter 303 Enemy Dynamics. In fact, when facing the enemy's attack, the Zaire kingdom still followed the previous combat concept, never fight in close combat if you can attack from a distance. First, the artillery with the longest attack distance launched an attack while shocking the enemy's morale, trying to strike the local manpower and disrupt the order of the enemy's formation. At the same time, the cavalry brigade rushed out of the battlefield while pinning down the enemy on the periphery, relying on the mobility of the cavalry to seize the opportunity to launch an attack. Then, when the enemy rushed to the front of the formation, after several rounds of attacks by the long-range infantry, the cavalry launched a counterattack, trying to create more chaos in the enemy formation, while the infantry behind formed a battle line and waited in a siege. In the end, if the enemy did not collapse, it would enter a state of close combat, which was what the Zaire Kingdom army least wanted to see. Fortunately, although the enemy risked their lives to advance, the final moment of close combat still did not come. On the other side, after Ian ordered the attack, he watched the 50,000 slave legions in front of him charge at the enemy, expecting that the Zaire Kingdom's army would collapse in one blow. Report to the Knight Commander, the cavalry regiment of the Zaire army has launched a charge to the north. As soon as the battle started, a knight brought him a piece of news that made him uneasy. Ian immediately asked, "Knights? To the north? How many troops are there?" Report to the Knight Commander, the strength of the knights of the Zaire army is close to 10,000. The answer of the messenger knight made Ian put down his worries. It was a complete suicide to launch an attack on his army, deployed in the north with a knight regiment of less than 10,000. He immediately order the 2nd Legion to intercept the knights of the Zaire army. After giving this order, Ian no longer paid attention to the cavalry of the Zaire Kingdom, but waited for the battle report from the slave army in front. Report to the Knight Commander, the slave army is 2,000 meters away from the Zaire army. Report to the Knight Commander, the slave army is 1,000 meters away from the Zaire army and is about to enter the attack range of the Zaire army. As soon as the messenger finished reporting this information, Ian heard a huge noise coming from the front, and the thunder-like explosion sounded continuously into his ears. Although I had long known that Zaire had a mysterious weapon with great power and could attack far, Ian had also prepared for heavy losses. But after seeing and hearing the attack of this mysterious weapon, Ian finally saw how powerful this rumored weapon was. Although Ian was prepared for heavy losses, he had no worries about winning the final victory. But after seeing this mysterious weapon of Zaire, he couldn't help but feel a little worried about the final victory. Report to the Knight Commander, the slave army suffered heavy losses in the attack and has shown signs of collapse. Collapse? So fast? Ian saw that the army of Zaire had just launched an attack, and the slave army, which was twice the number of the Zaire army, showed signs of collapse. While feeling a little incredible, he immediately ordered the 1st Army to strictly supervise the battle and not let a single slave soldier escape. The slave army can't be allowed to collapse like this. If it collapses so easily, the defeat of 50,000 slave soldiers will backfire on the army in the rear, and the next battle will not have to continue. Following Ian's order, the slave army, under the urging of the 1st Army, continued to launch an attack and charged forward vigorously. This line of slave soldiers knew that, although the front was dangerous, there was a glimmer of hope. If they ran back, they would die. Moreover, the enemy army in front was only more than 10,000 people, but they had 50,000 people. As long as they rushed forward, they would definitely win. However, the artillery of the Zaire kingdom had never stopped. In the risk of turning into a ball of meat paste, the slaves buried their heads and rushed forward. They were about to rush forward, but the two rows of strange fire-breathing weapons in front of the enemy, after a pause for a moment, burst out with a force that frightened them to despair. With a boom, the slave soldiers who rushed to the front disappeared in an instant and turned into a piece of broken meat splattering everywhere. The hard broken bones in the soldiers' bodies also turned into weapons when they splashed and pierced into the bodies of their comrades behind them. Seeing the red mist of flesh and blood in front of the formation, the slave soldiers who rushed up from behind were frightened. Looking at the rows of black muzzles in front of the Zaire kingdom, which were neatly pointed at their side, they could not help but stop charging, as if they were being stared at by death. Some slave soldiers were even swallowed by the blood mist floating in front of them, and they could not help but go crazy and attack their comrades around them. Some were even desperate enough to commit suicide, just to leave themselves a complete corpse, which was better than turning into this blood mist. Before these slave soldiers could recover from the chaos, a large number of cavalry rushed out of the opposite army and attacked the slave army in chaos. The slave soldiers who stood in front of the cavalry either turned into flying men and flew backwards, or turned into a pool of rotten meat under the iron hooves of the war horses. They could not even slow down the opponent's speed. The back and forth cavalry attacks made the slave soldiers who finally recovered completely collapse. No matter how the supervising soldiers behind them chopped and killed, they could not stop the slave soldiers from escaping from the Zaire kingdom's army. Report to the Knight Commander, the slave army was annihilated. Ian was at the rear of the Baxter National Army and could not see the battle in front of him at all. He could only get the latest news on the battlefield from the battle reports from the front. He got the news that the slave army was annihilated from the panicked knight in front of him. Before that, he got the battle report that the slave army suffered heavy losses. What happened? How could it be so fast? How could it collapse? The slave army has 50,000 people. Hearing the question from Knight Commander Ian, the knight's face became even uglier, and there was even a trace of despair in it. Master Knight Commander, the slave army was annihilated by the knights who suddenly rushed out of the Zaire army. Then the knight reported the battle situation in front to Ian in detail. More than 3,000 knights? Ian felt a little incredible. He didn't expect that the Zaire army had only more than 20,000 troops, but there were actually more than 10,000 knights. This completely caught him off guard. The Knights of Zaire mentioned by Ian are the cavalry of Zaire. This is a type of soldier with a very strong impact force, especially the heavy cavalry that rushed in front. Even if there was a dense spear formation ready, they had to face at least the first 3 rows of infantry being killed before they could barely stop the attack of the heavy cavalry. Of the 50,000 slave legions, more than 10,000 were killed by artillery, and nearly a few thousand soldiers were killed by long-range infantry. At the time of the final collapse, only more than 10,000 were left. The difference was the number of soldiers killed by the cavalry. In just 2 short charges of 3,600 cavalry, the enemy lost more than 10,000 and nearly 20,000 soldiers. Such a powerful attack force made the soldiers supervising the battle behind the enemy tremble. Another reason why the 50,000 slave army suffered such a great loss was that the battle process was too fast. At a distance of 900 meters, it took only 3 or 4 minutes for the slave legion to launch an attack and rush to the front of the Zaire army. Counting the time when the Zaire cavalry launched a counterattack, the total time until the final destruction was less than half an hour. In such a short period of time, many soldiers of the slave army didn't even know what was happening and died on the battlefield. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 304, The Iron Cavalry Shows Its Might. Time goes back to half an hour ago. After Hu Okubang received the order to attack at the beginning of the war, he led the cavalry brigade to attack the enemy in the northwest of the battlefield. Order: light cavalry in front, heavy cavalry in the back, attack. The cavalry brigade bypassed the attacking slave army and rushed straight to the northern army behind the enemy. When it was about to rush into the enemy formation, the cavalry brigade drew an arc in front of the enemy and turned north. While the cavalry brigade turned more than 200 meters away from the enemy's army formation, the light cavalry shot the crossbow arrows that had been prepared in the hand crossbow at the enemy. The crossbow arrows were boosted by the cavalry charge and easily flew over the distance of more than 200 meters and shot into the enemy's army formation. The enemy soldiers were ready to deal with the impact, but they did not expect that the Zaire army's cavalry did not launch a charge, but shot arrows at them. Unprepared, the front row of spearmen suffered heavy losses. The cavalry brigade has 5 cavalry battalions, each of which has 3 light cavalry battalions and 2 heavy cavalry battalions. The cavalry brigade has 4,500 light cavalry and 3,000 heavy cavalry in addition to the brigade headquarters. Each of the 4,500 light cavalry fired 3 crossbow arrows, and 13,500 crossbow arrows flew into the enemy's formation in one round of shooting. This round of attack alone caused the enemy to lose nearly 5,000 soldiers, leaving many loopholes in the enemy's formation. Okubeng saw the opportunity and ordered, "Heavy cavalry, charge." The 3,000 heavy cavalry following the light cavalry also saw the miserable situation of the enemy and followed closely to charge the enemy. Boom boom boom, the heavy cavalry lined up in an arrow formation, and the momentum of the charge towards the enemy made the enemy soldiers facing them tremble. It seemed that the heavy cavalry came from the sky, wearing full armor, and carrying unmatched impact force, rushed into the front row of the enemy's bustling front row. Kijun was one of the 3,000 heavy cavalry, but he was not an ordinary cavalry, but the commander of a cavalry battalion. But in the process of charging, he was actually not much different from ordinary heavy cavalry. In the process of charging, he saw that he rushed into the panicked crowd of the enemy army, and he did not feel any sense of obstruction, as if the enemy in front of him did not exist. It was not until he was about to rush out of the enemy's army that he clearly felt that the speed of the horse he sat on had dropped a little. But it was only a moment, and Kijun saw that the 3,000 heavy cavalry that were charging had already rushed out of the enemy's army, and the sense of obstruction disappeared. He did not kill an enemy in the formation, but in the process of charging, he saw the pieces of corpses lying in front of the warhorse, which became more broken under the hooves of the warhorse he was sitting on. Heavy cavalry, follow me to charge again. Kijun looked at the chaos of the enemy's army, drew a big circle on the vast grassland behind the enemy, and charged again at the army that had just rushed out without slowing down. Kijun used to be a light cavalry commander of the Guard Battalion, and later he was promoted to the commander of the light cavalry battalion of the Guard Brigade. During the last major reorganization, he was transferred to Okubeng's cavalry brigade and served as the commander of one of the cavalry battalions. He has been in this position until now. This time, the 3,000 heavy cavalry launched the attack under his leadership, which also showed Okubeng's trust in him. Following Kijun's order, the heavy cavalry once again attacked from behind the enemy and killed them more easily than the last time. General Kijun brought the heavy cavalry, which had not lost much personnel, to the grassland in the north and slowly stopped in front of the brigade where Okubeng was. He sat on his warhorse and saluted Okubeng. Okubeng returned the salute to Kijun and said, "Thank you for your hard work, rest here." This round of heavy cavalry's burst has basically consumed most of the horsepower. Even if the enemy army collapsed, it would not be able to continue to attack. Okubeng was still very optimistic about this ugly battalion commander. Although the Key army had a somewhat unrefined appearance, they were very brave in battle, which was why he ordered the Key army to lead the charge. The Key army took the heavy cavalry to target the brigade and ordered, "Arrange the troops and rest on the spot." Then he rode to Okubeng's side and said to Okubeng, who was looking at the battlefield with a telescope, "General, should we order a pursuit?" "No, you see, the army attacking the infantry has been defeated, and there is still time to use horsepower." Okubeng pointed to the battlefield in the southeast and replied to the Key army, and then order the cavalry brigade to rest on the spot and stay alert. As early as when the heavy cavalry launched the attack, The light cavalry launched waves of harassment against the enemy's middle formation, but because the enemy was prepared, the results were not great. When the enemy sent out cavalry to counterattack, Okubeng ordered the troops to withdraw in time. However, the light cavalry still tied down the enemy, preventing them from supporting the northern army in time. Now they have joined forces with Okubeng, making the enemy dare not act recklessly. The cavalry brigade ignored the enemy's cavalry at all. The enemy cavalry was very angry when they saw the cavalry brigade ignoring them, but the Zaire cavalry had just defeated the combat power of an entire legion in a short period of time, which made them hesitate. On the other hand, when the Zaire cavalry brigade launched an attack, Ian thought that he should be able to cope with it with the combat power of the 2nd Legion. Unfortunately, Ian didn't know that the Zaire cavalry brigade was completely different from the cavalry regiment with only flexibility and mobility in his impression. But what he didn't expect was that he had just received the news that the slave army was completely annihilated, and then he received another battle report that made him even more terrified. Report to the Knight Commander, the 2nd Legion suffered heavy losses under the attack of the Zaire army knights, and is about to collapse. What? There are only less than 10,000 cavalry regiments, and the 2nd Legion can't hold on. Ian had suffered enough blows today. He immediately came to his senses, and turned back to order the knights, go to support the 2nd Legion immediately. Yes, Knight Commander. A knight behind Ian saluted him, and immediately ordered loudly, the knights, follow me. The 10,000-man knights of the Baxter Kingdom rushed towards the 2nd Army in the north. Before the knights rushed to the 2nd Legion, they saw the Zaire Kingdom light cavalry harassing the northern part of the 1st Legion halfway. Then, the Zaire Kingdom light cavalry took the initiative to retreat without waiting for the knights to launch a charge, which made the knight leading the knights feel a sense of frustration, as if he had punched the air. Attack. The knight looked at the retreating Zaire Kingdom light cavalry and gave the order to continue the attack. He was going to support the 2nd Legion. But the next scene made the soldiers of the entire knights stunned. Chapter 305, Decisive Battle and Great Victory. I saw a team of several thousand heavy cavalrymen charging at the chaotic 2nd Legion. The impact was like entering an empty space, and the earth was shaking. It made people tremble in their hearts. This scene made the soldiers in front of the knights unconsciously slow down. Some wildebeests even had a tendency to turn around and flee, let alone launch an attack. With the attack of the cavalry brigade and the defeat of the enemy in front of the main camp, the enemy army was left with only 2 legions. The enemy's 120,000 troops lost most of their troops in a short period of time, leaving only 40,000 to 50,000. At this moment, the initiative on the battlefield was in the hands of the Zaire army. Li Jing immediately ordered the whole army to launch an attack. The order was conveyed by the war drums and flags, letting the Zaire army know that it was time to counterattack. Imperial Guards, target the enemy's central army, attack. Zhao Wu received the order and immediately issued an order to attack. Di King also issued the same order to the conventional brigade in the south. Conventional brigade, attack. In addition, Okubeng, who was in the cavalry brigade in the north of the enemy army, also received Li Jing's order. He immediately drew his sword, pointed at the hesitant enemy cavalry in front, and ordered loudly, Cavalry Brigade, attack. Following Okubeng's order, the entire cavalry brigade launched an active attack on the opposite cavalry regiment. The cavalry of the Zaire Kingdom will let the people of this world know what the real battlefield king is. The cavalry regiment of the Baxter Kingdom looked at the Zaire cavalry who took the initiative to attack. Although they were a little worried, they still bravely charged at the Zaire cavalry brigade. Seeing that the 2 cavalry were getting closer and closer, and were about to collide with each other, the soldiers of the Baxter cavalry regiment saw that the Zaire cavalry in front of them suddenly split into 2, and avoided from their 2 wings. When the soldiers of the knights were about to breathe a sigh of relief, they were attacked from both wings. Arrows covered the sky from both sides, catching the knights off guard, and many of them fell off their horses. Before the knights could react to the sudden attack, they were attacked by the heavy cavalry of Zaire. The heavy cavalry of Zaire did not charge head-on, but wanted to have an angle with the direction of the charge of the knights of Baxter, and directly inserted into the knights, like a knife slashing it in 2. However, the cavalry brigade of Zaire took the initiative to split into two, using tactics, while the split of Baxter was passive, caused by the attack of the heavy cavalry of Zaire. The cavalry brigade then launched a series of attacks on the knights, like peeling potatoes, one piece after another, layer after layer, and continued to reduce. As the number of enemy troops decreased, only a few dozen cavalry were left surrounded in the middle with nowhere to go. Are all you Zaire people cowards who only use conspiracy and tricks, and dare not fight my knights head on? The knights of Baxter who led the knights saw that they were defeated, and roared at the Zaire cavalry who surrounded them. The warriors of the Zaire kingdom would not be merciful. In the end, these dozens of cavalrymen were drowned by the impact of the cavalry brigade, and became part of the corpses that could be seen everywhere on the battlefield. After the cavalry brigade dealt with the enemy's knights, the main force of the Zaire kingdom also launched an attack on the main force of the enemy. Okubeng also led the cavalry brigade that had just won 2 games, to attack the main force of the enemy from the north. Because it was an attack, the movement speed of the artillery could not keep up with the attack speed of the army. Fortunately, each artillery had a transport carriage. As long as it was put on and towed by a carriage, it could still barely keep up with the attack speed of the army. When the guards and the regular brigade marched neatly to 500 meters in front of the enemy's formation, they stopped, formed a battle formation, and did not move. The enemy soldiers were waiting for the Zaire kingdom to attack with some fear, and saw that the Zaire kingdom army stopped. Just when the enemy was confused, the Zaire kingdom army separated a passage from the middle. The enemy army collapsed immediately when they saw the carriages coming out of the passage of the Zaire army formation and the dark and dangerous objects behind the carriages. Seeing that the Zaire army had to put the artillery in front to attack them during the attack, the enemy army, which was already demoralized due to the failure of the attack, saw this scene like the last straw on the camel's back. This straw made the enemy army flee before the battle. The 2 basically intact legions were frightened and collapsed by the Zaire army before the battle, and fled in a hurry. This made Ian feel extremely desperate. How can this battle be fought? As the saying goes, a defeat is like a mountain collapsing. Ian saw that he was powerless to turn the tide, so he had to run away with them. Fortunately, he still had a guard, and fortunately he was riding a wildebeest, and could escape first. Ian escaped, but the infantry behind him was miserable. Since the Zaire army had pushed the artillery up, of course it would not be wasted. With several rounds of artillery fire, the fleeing enemy army fled faster. Seeing that the enemy had no power to fight back, Zhao Wu and Yi basically ordered at the same time, the whole army pursues. Shout to the enemy, those who kneel down and surrender will not be killed. They still remembered their purpose. They came to plunder labor, and the native language that the Zaire army shouted had long been learned by the soldiers of the whole army, just for the arrival of this day. The first to launch the pursuit were of course the cavalry of the 2 brigades. They chased after them and chopped them randomly, shouting repeatedly in the native language while chopping, those who kneel down and surrender will not be killed. The cavalry brigade that arrived just caught up with the whole army's pursuit, and also launched the pursuit together with the cavalry of the 2 brigades, while shouting. The enemy soldiers heard the shouts of the Zaire army behind them, and some soldiers saw that they were about to be caught up. With no way out, they knelt on the ground and out, waiting for the judgment of fate. Unexpectedly, the Zaire army did not attack these soldiers who were kneeling on the ground when they passed by, but only attacked those who were still running for their lives. With these examples, more and more soldiers surrendered later. The cavalry chased in front, the infantry escorted the prisoners in the back, and the militia came with ropes in time to receive them. It turned out that when the enemy army began to collapse, Li Jing ordered the militia in the rear security bureau to catch up. As the pursuit continued, the battlefield, which was just filled with the sound of war drums, shouts of killing, artillery, and horse hooves, became quiet. Only wounds, broken bodies, broken arms, broken armor, and enemy wounded who were lucky enough to escape were left. The wounded soldiers of the Zaire kingdom were treated in time at the beginning, and would not stay until now. However, due to its special nature, the cavalry brigade had few wounded soldiers, as long as they fell off their horses, and those who did not fall off their horses were not seriously injured. The pursuit lasted until dusk. The Zaire kingdom cavalry did not return until there were no large-scale deserters in front. When chasing, they galloped on horseback, but when returning, they did not need to. Teams of cavalry drove groups of prisoners back to the camp one after another, making the militia responsible for receiving prisoners busy. After statistics, in this decisive battle, the Zaire army lost 189 cavalrymen, 17 infantrymen, and nearly 1,000 lightly and seriously wounded. Although the Zaire army suffered such losses, the results of the battle were very great. Nearly 60,000 enemy soldiers were killed, and more than 30,000 enemy soldiers were captured. The remaining more than 30,000 enemy soldiers escaped. After all, the number of Zaire's troops was limited. On this vast plain, as long as they were lucky, they could still escape. Chapter 306 Raid Plan. I'm here to see you, General. Early the next morning, Huo Kubang came to Li Jing's tent and happened to meet Li Jing, who was about to come out. It's General Huo. Come in and tell me what you want to say. Li Jing came out just to take a breath. Seeing that Huo Kubang wanted to see him, Li Jing returned to the tent. Yes, General. Huo Kubang followed Li Jing into the tent and sat down in order of importance. Li Jing sat in the main seat with a majestic look and said, I saw all the battles of the cavalry brigade yesterday. Under the leadership of General Huo, the cavalry brigade won 2 consecutive victories. They fought so well. The 2 battles of the cavalry brigade were all fought with a small number of troops against a large number of troops. Less than 10,000 cavalrymen defeated troops 3 times their own strength. Moreover, one of the battles was a duel between 2 cavalry units, which was even more exciting. General, you are too kind. I'm just doing my best. Huo Kubang clasped his fists towards Li Jing and said modestly. Then Huo Kubang explained his purpose to Li Jing. General, I suggest that the cavalry brigade go first and attack the enemy's capital. The Zaire army had just fought and won yesterday, but they were still injured. The most important thing to do now is to let the soldiers rest. So Li Jing was a little surprised to hear that Huo Kubang came to ask for a fight and asked, General Huo, can you tell me why you are so anxious? Huo Kubang replied, General, I think it is precisely because we won yesterday that the enemy army must not expect our army to attack at this time, and they will definitely beat the enemy without any hurry. Well, that makes sense. Li Jing nodded in agreement with Huo Kubang's words, but then he turned and asked, General Huo, have you ever thought about the cavalry brigade going deep into the enemy's belly? Where will the army's supplies come from? Li Jing meant that, although the idea is good, it is not practical. If the army has no supplies, no matter how powerful it is, it has its limits. Unexpectedly, Huo Kubang was not embarrassed at all when hearing Li Jing's question. Instead, he confidently replied, Don't worry, General. I have already carefully investigated and found that we can still find food and grass in the enemy country. Food and grass are food and fodder. Food is a necessity for soldiers, and fodder is the food for war horses. The fodder for war horses is not as simple as a handful of hay. Sometimes, they eat much better than humans. Black beans are the staple food of the northern barbarians. Because they are often bloating, the people of our country do not eat them. However, they are a kind of excellent horse feed. In times of emergency, if they are cooked, the soldiers can use them to satisfy their hunger. Huo Kubang explained his research to Li Jing in detail. After talking about the supply problem, he briefly explained the battle plan of the cavalry brigade to Li Jing. General, according to intelligence, the enemy's capital is to the west of this plain. It will take only a few days for the cavalry to arrive there at their speed. Just prepare 3 days of dry food, which will be enough for the cavalry brigade to return. After listening to Huo Kubang's words, Li Jing pondered for a while and made a decision. Okay, since General Huo has a perfect plan, I agree. The reason why Li Jing agreed to Huo Kubang's raid plan was not because Huo Kubang had a way to feed the enemy, but because the capital of Baxter was to the west of Muilan, less than 100 kilometers away from the camp of Zaire. With such a short distance, at the speed of cavalry, 1 day is enough to arrive. If dry food is prepared, even if the raid fails, 3 days will be enough for the cavalry brigade to return safely. If the distance is longer, the raid will not be necessary, because it is really difficult to keep up with the supply, and feeding the enemy is not something that can be taken for granted. Hu Okubang got the answer he wanted, and he was very happy to accept the order and said, "Thank you, General. Remember, you must do what you can." Although Li Jing agreed to Hu Okubang's raid plan, he was still a little worried. He didn't want Hu Okubang to take the entire army to die for personal reasons. Although Hu Okubang was happy at this moment, he still noticed Li Jing's worry, so he replied, "General, please rest assured, I know the priorities." After getting the permission to attack, Hu Okubang set off with more than 7,000 intact cavalrymen of the cavalry brigade after breakfast, and arrived at a small town west of Muan in the evening of the same day. This town was where Ian was at the time, Stark Town. After the defeat, Ian rode a wildebeest and led his guards all the way west, escaped the disaster first, and arrived at Stark Town that night. Greeted by the strange looks of the local dignitaries, Ian entered Stark Town in a panic. The first thing he said was to issue an order the whole town to be under martial law and strengthen the guard. Facing the doubts of the local nobles, Ian ignored them and continued to order, "Send a message to the monarch to request support and say that the Zaire army has attacked here." What? The Zaire army is about to attack? When the nobles heard this, they were a little bit unbelievable at first. That was an army of 120,000. It had only been a few days, and they were defeated like this? However, when they saw Ian's miserable appearance and the soldiers outside the city who had thrown away their armor and weapons, and their number was less than 10,000, they had to believe it. The Zaire army is coming. What should we do? Or should we run for our lives? Yes, I heard that the Zaire army has captured all the young and strong men and dragged them into slavery. I don't want to be a slave. I'll go back and pack up and rush to Baxter City tomorrow. But after believing it, the small nobles in these places were even more panicked. They didn't think about completing Ian's orders at all. Instead, they discussed how to save their lives, and they did it in front of Ian, which made Ian very angry. "Okay, it's time now, and you actually think about how to run for your lives?" Ian shouted loudly. His emotions were completely out of control, and he became very excited. He had experienced ups and downs today, and the accumulated emotions finally broke out at this moment. "Come on, lock up all these traitors for this night, and confiscate their homes for this night to see if they have already connected to the Zaire kingdom." This was completely Ian's venting. During the process of confiscation, any family that had any of Zaire's goods was considered a traitor, and was killed by Ian. All the confiscated property was distributed to the soldiers to boost morale, and the food was also confiscated. Ian was too embarrassed to go back to Baxter City. He planned to gather the defeated soldiers and conscript strong men to fight hard. Even if he couldn't defeat the Zaire army, he wanted to buy more time for Baxter City. But who knew that just one day later, the Knights of Zaire arrived outside the town. Chapter 307, Breaking Through the Town. Report, Sir Knight Commander, the Zaire army has arrived outside the town. Ian was shocked to hear the news. It was incredible that the Zaire kingdom could move so quickly. It turned out to be the Knights of the Zaire army. Ian climbed up the simple wall of the town and breathed a sigh of relief when he saw that the Zaire army outside the town was just a group of cavalry. He didn't believe that the cavalry alone could capture the town with a wall. If the rest of the Zaire army came outside the town, Ian would have to fight hard, but since the Zaire army was cavalry, he had nothing to worry about. Ian admitted that the Knights of the Zaire kingdom were very powerful, but that was only in the wild. As long as he held his ground and didn't go out, the Zaire cavalry would be unable to defeat him. Could it be that the Zaire cavalry could use their war horses to trample the city walls? It was already evening when Hu Okubang led the cavalry brigade to the outskirts of Stark Town. He originally wanted to try to launch a surprise attack, but looking at the heavily guarded town, he had no choice but to order, "Retreat 10 miles. It was already so late today, there was no chance of a surprise attack, and even if they wanted to attack the city, they had to wait until tomorrow morning. So Hu Okubang ordered the cavalry brigade to retreat 5 kilometers again and prepare to rest for a night. Nothing happened overnight, and Stark Town did not come to sneak attack the camp. Although Hu Okubang was not sure about the enemy's actions, he still had to make the necessary preparations. Early the next morning, when Hu Okubang led the cavalry brigade to the outskirts of the town again, The enemy immediately climbed the city wall to prevent the cavalry brigade from attacking. How do you think that such a shabby city wall can stop this, General? Okubeng laughed and said to Liu, the general's gift to them. Yes, General, I think the enemy will be very satisfied with this gift. Liu clasped his fists and saluted, and then said meaningfully, and then waved to the back. Immediately, 300 light cavalrymen rushed out of the formation and rushed towards the town. Oh, I didn't expect you to be so fearless. Ian looked at the Zaya cavalrymen who attacked early in the morning. He felt incredible and alert at the same time. Seeing the hundreds of cavalrymen rushing out from the opposite side, he immediately ordered, "Prepare for defense." The 300 light cavalrymen were about to hit the city wall, but when they were still more than 10 meters away from the city wall, they turned together and accelerated backwards. Ian carefully saw that when these Zaya cavalrymen turned around, they threw a black cloth bag at the city wall. From the looks of it, the cloth bag was not light and seemed to be smoking. Looking at the cloth bag with green smoke at the foot of the city wall, Ian instinctively told him that it was dangerous and he had to stay away from this thing. Ian shouted, "Run." He took 2 steps at a time and rushed quickly towards the bottom of the city wall, but before he could run a few steps, with a boom, Ian felt a tremor and fell to the ground. The loud noise beside his ears made Ian somewhat deaf, and he sat on the ground dizzy. After a while, a voice came quickly from a distance. "Knight Commander! Knight Commander!" Ian stood up with the help of the guards and asked the somewhat anxious knight in front of him, "What's going on?" "Knight Commander, the city wall has collapsed, and the Zaya army has entered the city." The knight repeated the words he had reported several times. Ian had completely recovered from this matter. Listening to the shouting and killing sounds everywhere, he hurriedly ordered, "Hurry up and organize the soldiers to fill up the collapsed places." "Knight Commander, the city wall has collapsed in 3 places. It's too late." After the knight said this, he suddenly saw that Ian's eyes were a little wrong, as if he saw something that made him very scared. Then, a clear sound of horse hooves came to the knight's ears. He knew that Ian had seen something behind him, and the knight's face had become extremely desperate. With a sound of puff, a flash of knife light flashed, and the knight's head was separated in an instant. The next second, a column of blood spurted out from the upright neck several meters high, and the falling blood drops covered the faces of Ian and others. It turned out that a Zaya cavalryman rushed over and stabbed the knight from behind. The skilled slash was fast, fierce and accurate. But because the warhorse was too fast, the cavalryman only had time to swing the knife and galloped past Ian, allowing him to luckily save his life. One after another, the Zaya cavalry rushed into the town and killed anyone they saw, whether it was a knight in armor or a civilian holding farm tools. They were quickly cleared out under the attack of the cavalry brigade. "General, this town has been captured, but the enemy commander has not been found yet." Just after noon, Liu reported the results of the battle to Okubeng. Okubeng stood on a gap opened by the black gunpowder, looking at the thick smoke in the town, wondering, he escaped. What a good luck. After all, the cavalry brigade had less than 10,000 soldiers, and they could not take into account the external blockade when they were attacking with all their strength. It was normal for the enemy commander to escape in the chaos. Okubeng didn't care much about it. It would be better if he was caught, and it didn't matter if he escaped. Anyway, the attack had come to this point, and the rest would be simple. Okubeng seemed to have thought of something, and asked Liu, "How many packs of gunpowder do we have left?" "General, there are not many left. It's not enough for another siege." Liu reported to Okubeng truthfully. Okubeng made full preparations before the raid. He knew that it would be a joke to attack the city with cavalry alone, but it would be different with the siege weapon. Before setting off, he specially found leeching and applied for 500 packs of black gunpowder. Each pack of black powder weighs about 10 kilograms. Each cavalryman carries 1 pack on his back, which does not take up much space and does not increase the load. However, today's attack consumed 300 packs of black powder at a time, leaving only 200 packs, which is not enough for a battalion to charge. Is that so? Okubeng pondered for a moment and ordered, "Collect food and grass in the town, and continue to set off tomorrow morning." "Yes, General." The messenger following Hu Okubang immediately took the order and said yes, then rode his horse to the town to convey the order to the various battalions of the cavalry brigade. "General, are you planning to?" Liuki heard Hu Okubang's order and said a little uncertainly, "Is this too hasty? No hurry, aren't we setting off tomorrow?" Hu Okubang didn't want to delay in this shabby town any longer, as he was thinking about the capital of Baxter. Yes, it's you. Ian said to a guard riding a wildebeest, "Speed up immediately and rush back to report to the monarch that Stark Town has been breached by the Zyre army and request reinforcement." Ian had just escaped from the town and saw that there were no Zyre soldiers chasing him, so he immediately asked the guards to go to the capital to report the news. Ever since he saw with his own eyes that the knight was beheaded by the Zyre cavalry less than a meter in front of him and his face was sprayed with blood, he no longer had the courage to sacrifice himself for the king. Now he just wanted to survive. At this moment, Ian, with a bloody face, rode a wildebeest and walked exhaustedly in the opposite direction of Stark Town. After a day's rest, his body and mind, which had finally recovered, were hit again. Ian, who was dejected, completely lost his confident look in the past. It is estimated that even an ordinary Zyre soldier could make him flee now. Chapter 308, Unexpected Gains. "General, we found a lot of food and grass in the town." As soon as Hu Okubang gave the order to collect food and grass, a soldier came to report. When Hu Okubang heard this, he immediately asked, "How much food and grass is there, and what kind is it?" The soldier replied, "General, there are many warehouses, and they are full. Most of them are black beans, a small amount of rice, and a warehouse of hay." "General, this is the enemy's granary. There are so many food and grass. It's better to inform General Lee." Liuki was also very surprised when he heard the soldier's words, but he still put forward his suggestions in time. Hu Okubang was startled at first, then after hearing Liuki's suggestion, he nodded in agreement and said, "That's what we should do. Send out a messenger immediately to report to the rear." "General, should we wait for the arrival of the army behind us?" Liuki understood what Hu Okubang meant and suggested hesitantly, "With so much food and grass left here, I'm afraid." Hu Okubang raised his hand to interrupt. "No need. Speed is of the essence in war. Order the soldiers to bring enough food and grass for our army and set off early. As for these food and grass." Having said that, Hu Okubang thought about it and did not directly say how to deal with it. Instead, he loudly ordered the messenger behind him, "Order the residents of this town to repair the damaged city walls." When Liuki heard Hu Okubang's order, he asked uncertainly, "What does the general mean?" "The food and grass are kept in the town. As long as the damaged city walls are repaired, there is no need to worry about the food and grass." Hu Okubang did not mention the problem of the residents of the town, and Liuki understood what he meant. As long as the damaged walls are repaired and the residents are driven out of the city, although the food and grass are not foolproof, there is no problem in holding on until the arrival of the army behind. The distance of less than 70 to 80 kilometers is only 2 days at the marching speed of the Zyre army. This plan is very good, but it will take some time to repair the city wall. Liuki looked at Hu Okubang with admiration and shook his head at the end, expressing regret for the delay. "It won't take much time. It's also good to let the soldiers take a break while the city wall is being repaired." Hu Okubang looked to the west and said in a deep tone, "It's not far away." With Hu Okubang's order, Stark Town suddenly became lively. The residents who were hiding in the house and waiting quietly were invited out one by the cavalry, and they brought simple tools to repair the collapsed city wall. Because it was just a stopgap measure, the Zyre army did not plan to stay here for a long time, and in order to rush, they only let the residents pile up simple materials such as gravel, logs, and furniture at the gap. In less than an hour, the damaged city wall was repaired. The residents of the town thought that they could finally relax, but then the Zyre army drove them all out of the city. "General, the city gates should be closed everywhere." Hu Okubang stood outside the city gate on his warhorse. After hearing the soldier's report, he immediately ordered, "The whole army is on the move." At this time, the entire cavalry brigade gathered outside the town. Huo Kubang looked at the residents who had not gone far away in the distance and galloped without looking back. These people would be dealt with by the army behind. Next, it was not far from the capital of the Baxter Kingdom. With the speed of the cavalry brigade, it would take at most half a day to arrive. Report to the general. The cavalry brigade has urgent military information. Li Jing was still on the hill. The army behind had not set off yet and was spreading out to search for young and strong men in the surrounding villages and towns. Hearing that the cavalry brigade had urgent military information, Li Jing immediately said, "Present it quickly." After reading the military information sent back by Huo Kubang, Li Jing learned that the cavalry brigade had found the enemy's food and grass in Stark Town on the edge of the pastoral plain ahead. He was very happy and immediately ordered the Imperial Guards and regular brigades to gather in Stark Town ahead. Since the arrival of Li Jing and Liug, the Shenji camp has become Li Jing's guard. This is also Yang Song's order. Li Jing is the commander of the expeditionary army after all. How can he do without a guard? And with Yang Song's order, the Shenji camp, a unit directly under Yang Song, will serve as its guard, which also leaves the other army generals speechless. Not long after, Liug rushed over after hearing the news, and the first sentence he said when he entered the military tent was, "Is it true that the cavalry brigade seized the enemy's food and grass?" Li Jing saw Liug, who was in a hurry but with expectation, nodded calmly and replied, "Yes, but the seized food and grass is only enough for the enemy for 5 days. 5 days? Liug repeated the time, took a breath, and continued, "It's already a lot. The enemy has at least 120,000 troops. 5 days is not a small number." Yes, it is a lot. According to the battle report sent back by General Huo, there are an estimated 1 million kilograms of food and grass. Li Jing said this number and sighed a little dissatisfied. It would be even better if all this food and grass could be used by our country. 1 million kilograms of food and grass, as long as 1% is edible by our army, it can save 10 times the amount of food and grass for our country. Liug said, thinking of the letter sent by Yang Song 2 days ago. Yang Song said in the letter that it would be best for the troops to complete their goals as soon as possible. As time went by, the logistical pressure on the Xia Kingdom was increasing. If there were only more than 20,000 troops on the expedition, the daily consumption would not be considered a big deal with the current national strength of the Xia Kingdom, even if 30,000 militiamen and the fleet at sea were added. However, more than 50,000 troops were all abroad, and they were all in places with inconvenient transportation. As the army gradually penetrated into the enemy's hinterland, the pressure on logistics and transportation doubled every day. Behind the hill, where Li Jing was, in order to facilitate the timely supply of food, grass, and ammunition to the front army, the Rear Security Bureau even let the militia build a wide road directly to the seaport in the wilderness. This is also the reason why Li Jing temporarily kept his troops in place. Even if it was to prevent the army from being idle and to disperse them to the surrounding villages and towns, to recruit young and strong people, the distance was controlled as much as possible, and Yiking and Zhao Wu were specifically instructed not to run far. How could he not be happy when he heard that the enemy's food and grass had been captured? Just as Liug said, even if only 10,000 kilograms of the million kilograms of food and grass were available to Xia, it would save more than 10 times the manpower and material resources for Xia's logistics. 2 days later, except for the cavalry brigade, the rest of the Xia army all met outside Stark Town. With the arrival of the army, the residents who were trying to climb over the city wall all fled in all directions. But how could they escape in front of the Xia army? After Li Jing learned about Huo Kubang's dynamics from these people, he shook his head helplessly at Liug and said, "This Huo Kubang he is afraid that I will stop him." Haha, General Huo is a man of temperament. General Li, don't blame him. After Liug also learned about Huo Kubang's actions, he heard Li Jing's words and laughed out loud. Chapter 309 The Source of War. The cavalry brigade set out in the afternoon of the day when Stark Town was captured and arrived at the capital of Baxter City, at dusk that day. Baxter City was originally named Dongbo City, but after Aubrey founded the country and proclaimed himself king, Dongbo established Baxter in the name of Aubrey, and Dongbo City was renamed Baxter City. The cavalry brigade stopped 10 kilometers away from Baxter City. In order to avoid being discovered by the enemy, the cavalry brigade hid in a forest. Lurk took a kettle and handed it to Hukubeng, who was checking the map. Seeing that Hukubeng was looking at the place marked Baxter City and thinking about something, he whispered, "General, it's getting late today. How about attacking the city tomorrow?" "Attacking the city?" Hukubeng shook his head repeatedly, with a slight curve at the corner of his mouth, and said, "Who said that this general is going to attack the city? Not attacking the city?" Lurk asked puzzledly. Hukubeng's preparations in the past few days looked like he was going to attack the city, no matter how you looked at it. Now he suddenly said that he was not going to attack the city. Then what were they running all the way here for? It's better to be prepared than not to be prepared. Hukubeng seemed to know what Lurk was thinking and replied, "Baxter City is not comparable to this small town today. It is a rare strong city. It cannot be blown up by 200 bags of gunpowder alone. General is wise. I admire you." Lurk had been worried about this problem, but Hukubeng's performance had always made it difficult for him to directly raise objections. Now that he heard that the other party had thought everything through, he immediately praised him. Hukubeng waved his hand and said, "You must have known it a long time ago." Hukubeng was not blind. He saw that Lurk was worried. "Don't worry, I'm not a reckless person. I know about these things." Hukubeng comforted Lurk and said, "If you have any suggestions, just speak up. This is your duty. If you keep silent and it gets out, the monarch will blame me for being arbitrary." "General, that's too serious. With your talent, how could the monarch blame you?" Upon hearing what Hukubeng said, Lurk hurriedly clasped his fists and said, "In the future, I will report to you in a timely manner." "Oh, that's right." Hukubeng nodded heavily and said, "You are the staff officer of the cavalry brigade. If you don't give your opinions, no one will dare to." "Yes, General." Lurk clasped his fists and said yes. After a pause, he asked, "General, may I ask why our army is not here to attack the city?" "Haha, good question." Hukubeng didn't know whether to say that Lurk asked in a timely manner, or that the question itself was well asked, or both. Hukubeng laughed twice, then stopped laughing immediately and said seriously, "This general came here for the goal of our country." "Goal? General, you mean the young and strong in this country?" Lurk pointed in the direction of Baxter City. After Hukubeng nodded in agreement, he was even more confused, so he asked, "How can we get young and strong without attacking the city?" Everyone in the Xia Kingdom, from Yangsong to ordinary officers, knew that it was unreasonable to go to the Xia Kingdom this time, so in daily conversations, they deliberately avoided words such as plunder and slaves, and instead used words such as young and strong and labor. No matter what the reason for launching a war is, and what it is for, at least on the surface there must be a decent name, which is the so-called not justifiable. Therefore, for this war that is actually plunder, in the Xia Kingdom, the Xuanzhengyuan's propaganda to the country and abroad is to claim that Baxter did not listen to the advice of the Xia Kingdom, insisted on ignoring regional peace, and invaded the surrounding forces, and launched an arbitration and punishment war. In other words, it is not our Xia country that wants to invade Baxter, but Baxter country is ignorant of good and evil, relying on its own strength to launch invasions everywhere. This is unjust and immoral. We Xia country is attacking your Baxter country to punish you. This is a just war. Perhaps for the big and small forces in this world, there is no need for reasons or excuses to start a war. There is no reason for starting a war. It is just that the people in power want to start a war, even if it is for boredom. Ordinary civilians will not care about such things, and they can't care at all. They can only struggle under the power game of the powerful, just to live an extra hour, day, year. But Xia country is completely different. Starting a war will definitely be recorded in history. If future generations know that their ancestors are war maniacs, even if they don't say much, at least they won't agree in their hearts. Moreover, Zaya country is now an era of universal education, and the people in the country more or less understand some truths. As the person in power, it is natural to win the support of the people in the country, even if there is no need. This is a cultural gap between the two worlds and the two nations. What Zaya wants is righteousness, wisdom, and reason, not the superficial but barbaric civilization of the upper class. This question is better. Okubang nodded with satisfaction, pointed to the city of Baxter in the west, and said, "It's not only that city that has young and strong people." When Elayuki heard what Okubang said, it seemed that a flash of lightning flashed through his mind, and he woke up immediately and said excitedly, "Yes, it's not only that city that has young and strong people. Her general is still wise." Elayuki gave Okubang a thumbs up and said, "As long as we ignore Baxter City, no, it should be that, as long as we isolate Baxter City, Baxter country will not be able to make any big waves." Elayu is right. It's not okay to ignore it. As long as we cut off the connection between Baxter City and the outside world, this country will be at our mercy. Okubang praised Elayuki's quick response. Still far behind the general, Elayuki bowed modestly to Okubang and said, "General, how should our army act tomorrow?" Elayuki remembered that Okubang would take out the map to study whenever he had time. Seeing his confident face, he knew that he must have thought of a plan. Elayu, the staff officer, is worthy of being Elayu. I can't hide this little thought of the general from you. Okubang was even more satisfied with Elayuki's attitude and recognized his wisdom. After praising Elayuki again, Okubang replied, "Of course, we start from Baxter City." He pointed to a location on the map hanging between two trees and continued, "Our army came from the east. I believe the enemy should also know the fall of the town, but they certainly don't know that the general is already outside their city. Therefore, we will rest in this forest for one night today. Tomorrow morning, our army will be at the gates of the city and make a siege posture so that they can only defend the city and dare not leave easily." Okubang explained his plan to Elayuki. Elayuki thought about it and found no problems with the other party's plan, so he asked, "What about after that? Although our army has resupplied with the enemy's food and fodder in the town, it can only hold out for 2 more days." Elayuki has worked with Okubang for so long, but he has never seen the Okubang like he is today. Chapter 310, Deeply Shocked. Before the war, Okubang, Elayuki and the cavalry brigade were stationed at Shanhaiguan together with Deking's regular brigade. At that time, Okubang looked clean and didn't talk much in daily life. Only when he was training the cavalry brigade, his eyes were full of spirit. However, even at this time, Elayuki carefully discovered that the other party would still look lonely from time to time. Unlike now, Okubang seemed to be reborn, and the whole person exuded a kind of light that made him feel a little dazzling. Now Elayuki knows that the reason why Okubang often sighed to the north in the past was that he yearned for the battlefield. Only on the battlefield can his value be brought into play. Maybe in Elayuki's opinion, it is better not to reflect and play this value, but everyone yearns for different things. In the war, launched by Zaya State against Baxter State, Okubang was always very active. Is the march hard? Worried about tactics and tactics? Headaches for the large number of enemy troops? These do not exist for Okubang. Is the march hard? Have you trained hard day and night in order to wait and welcome the coming of war? Worried about tactics and methods? Familiar with the art of war, always have strategies, and face challenges head on. That's what Okubang said. Have a headache because of the large number of enemy troops? Okubang wished that the enemy troops were as large as possible so that the world could know his heroic name better. Perhaps only during and after the war, when he saw the injured, disabled, and sacrificed soldiers, Okubang's heart would calm down and bow his head in grief and mourn. Although it is said that a general's success is the result of the sacrifice of thousands of soldiers, Okubang knew that war was not a joke, and he knew that these soldiers did not exist to make him famous. But when he started a war for the country and the king, it was not impossible for him to become famous when he won for the country and the king. Don't worry, Staff Officer Liu. I have already thought about it. After the enemy city is well defended, I will lead the soldiers to start clearing from the east of the enemy city, block the road, and prepare for the arrival of the army. Okubeng did not directly answer Ryuki's question, but continued to explain his action plan. Since the general has already thought about it, I will not ask any more questions. Although Ryuki did not get an answer from Okubeng said so, he was relieved. He could only let go of the remaining half of his heart when the army really arrived. In addition, Ryuki was relieved, because this place was only 2 or 3 days away from the army of Zaya State, and the cavalry brigade had 5 days of food and grass, which was sufficient. The next day, Okubeng and Ryuki led the cavalry brigade to Baxter City, 10 kilometers to the west, and arrived outside the city before noon. This was the real siege. In the city, just after Aubrey gave some instructions to the guards he trusted, another guard rushed into the room, panting, and reported to Aubrey in a panic. Report to the Lord, the Zaya army. The Zaya army is already outside the city. When Aubrey saw the panicked guard, he felt that something big was going to happen. After listening to the guard's intermittent report, he seemed to have been struck by a bolt from the blue and was stunned. This morning, he learned that the Stark town in the east had been breached by the Zaya army. He didn't expect that only a few hours later, the Zaya army came outside the city. With such a fast attack speed, how terrifying the Zaya army must be. Your Majesty, Your Majesty. The guard shouted twice before Aubrey came back to his senses, and the first thing he asked was, hurry up and send someone to call for reinforcement. Yes, Your Majesty. The guard took the order and was about to go out to pass the message, but Aubrey stretched out his hand and shouted, wait. Facing the guard's puzzled gaze, Aubrey finally regained some of his senses and asked, how many people in the Zaya army have come? Are they attacking the city? Your Majesty, there are nearly 10,000 Zaya soldiers, all riding hornless Zaya horses. They should be the Zaya knights, and they have already made preparations for a siege outside the city. Seeing that his monarch had finally regained his composure, the guard felt a little relieved. Aubrey frowned and thought, the Knights of Zaya? Less than 10,000 people, and they are still preparing to attack the city? Aren't they looking for death? Although he thought so, Aubrey still knew that, since the Zaya army was able to defeat his nearly 200,000 troops with less than 50,000 troops, it was not surprising that the knights outside the city dared to attack the city with less than 10,000 troops. If it were other forces, Aubrey would definitely send troops out of the city to destroy the other party immediately, which would make the other party so arrogant. But the closer it was to the Zaya army, it could not be treated with common sense. Orb figured it out through these two battles. When dealing with the army of Zaya, you can't just look at the number of troops on the surface. The real combat power is at least multiplied by 10. In other words, he should regard the knights outside the city with less than 10,000 as an army of 100,000. Thinking of this, he immediately realized how stupid it was for him to send 50,000 or 120,000 troops to trouble the Zaya army. The Zaya army is not an army of less than 50,000. It is clearly an army of 500,000. Okay. He only sent less than 200,000 troops. Isn't this just looking for death? Now, not only did he fail to win, but he also suffered heavy casualties. With the 30,000 troops in Baxter City, the cavalry regiment outside the city could not defend, let alone the main force of the Zaya army. After thinking this through, Aubrey slumped to the ground in the guard's suspicious eyes, his face full of despair, because he found that even when Baxter was victorious, the country's military strength was less than 300,000. Against the 500,000 of Zaya, it would be impossible to defeat them no matter what. How could this not make him despair? If I had known. If I had known. Aubrey muttered to himself in a low voice, leaving the guard at a loss as to what to do. It was not right to stay or go, so he had to bite the bullet and ask nervously, my lord, do we need to pass on the order? The Zaya army seems to be about to attack the city. Aubrey ignored the guard's words. He was now completely silent in his fantasy. He had scared himself. Facing the powerful Zaya army, he could not resist. Even if he wanted to agree to Zaya's conditions, with the national strength of Baxter, he could not agree to it, even if he wanted to. For a while, it was not only the guards who were in a dilemma, but Aubrey was also in a dilemma. Since there was no choice, he could only leave it to fate. In fact, Aubrey's comparison of the strength of the Zaire army was only half right. That is, the standard of military strength, and the other half was about logistics, the pressure of soldiers and generals, the right time, right place, and people, strategies, and tactics, and other non-intuitive reasons. If we really use the army of this world to force a comparison, at some point the combat power of the Zaire army can only be 10 times higher. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 311, Killing Two Birds with One Stone. In Starktown, Li Jing and Liug looked at the well-organized food and grass, and they didn't know how to deal with it. Among the 1 million catties of food and grass, 100,000 catties of rice that Zaire soldiers could use was easy to deal with, and it could be directly used as military rations, but the treatment of the other 900,000 catties of food and grass was really a problem. At the military council, after Li Jing raised the issue of food and grass, Zhao Wu suggested the Hubei Bureau can use some of the young and strong laborers on the way back to the country, and the remaining half can be burned directly. It's too wasteful to burn it directly. It's not appropriate. Lu Su heard Zhao Wu's suggestion and shook his head repeatedly. Zhao Wu said a little unconvinced, "Colonel Lu, what do you think?" Lu Su frowned, thought for a while and said, "Half of it can be used as General Zhao said to capture young and strong people and bring them back to the country. As for the rest of the food and grass transported back to the country, it is not cost effective due to the long journey." "Right, Councillor Lu, since you said so, why not burn it?" Zhao Wu looked at Lu Su a little proudly, waiting for his next response. Lu Su ignored Zhao Wu, but turned to Li Jing and Liug who were at the top, clasped his fists and said, "General Military Advisor, I suggest that the remaining food and grass be used to recruit local young and strong men." When Li Jing and Liug heard Lu Su's suggestion, they looked at each other and saw a smile in each other's eyes. Li Jing turned his head and said to Lu Su, "Tell me in detail." "Yes, General." Lu Su agreed and clasped his fists and said, "Our army came here for the people of the Northern Yi. Over the past period of time, our army has carried out a lot of plunder in the land of the Northern Yi. Although a large number of young and strong men have been captured, there are still many young and strong men who have fled the wilderness. These people who fled their homes were afraid of our army and dared not return home. They could only wander in the wilderness. Famine is inevitable." Lu Su explained to everyone in the military tent why he made this suggestion. "Therefore, I suggest spreading the news to the outside world and telling these starving people that, as long as they come to our army, there will be endless food. In this way, there will always be people from the northern barbarians who can't bear the hunger and come to give it a try." What Chief of Staff Lu said is even right. According to reports from scouts, people who died of hunger have been found in the wilderness. This method is good, but it is very time consuming. Our army can't stay here for so long. Liug pointed out the shortcomings of this strategy. When Lu Su heard Liug's question, he was a little hesitant. He had discovered this problem when he made the suggestion, but he couldn't think of a solution for a while, so he had to clasp his fists apologetically and said, "I'm incompetent. I haven't thought of a solution to this problem yet." Haha, Staff Officer Lu, don't blame yourself. The military advisor is just nitpicking. Li Jing saw that the atmosphere was a little wrong and laughed. The military advisor has already thought about this problem. Let's hear what the military advisor says. When Liug heard Li Jing's words, he glanced at him. He wanted to test everyone present. Since Commander Li Jing said so, he said helplessly, "Staff Officer Lu's suggestion coincides with the ideas of General Li and me." Seeing the surprise of everyone present, Liug first comforted Lu Su and said, "It's a matter of time. Staff Officer Lu just didn't think of it for a while. As long as there is time, I believe Staff Officer Lu will definitely be able to think of a solution." Lu Su bowed to Liug to express his gratitude, and Liug nodded to Lu Su and continued, "The solution to this problem is actually very simple. The reason why this plan takes a long time is that the people in the wilderness do not know the purpose of our army. What do you mean by this, military advisor? Deking, who had not spoken, asked Lurk a question at this time. General D, everyone. Lurk looked at everyone and did not immediately answer Deking's question, but asked back, how do the people here view our army when our army comes here? When Lusu heard Lurk's question, he thought of the previous time-consuming problem and thought about it in series. He knew Lurk's solution. His eyes flashed, and he immediately shouted, I know. It seems that Staff Officer Lu has thought of a solution. Li Jing looked at Staff Officer Lu with a smile, and was very satisfied with Lusu's wisdom. Lurk also smiled slightly, and said to Lusu, since Chief of Staff Lu knows it, then Chief of Staff Lu can explain it for me. Yes, I obey your command. Lusu clasped his fists and accepted the order, and then said to everyone present, what the military advisor means is that after our army arrived here, what we declared to the people of the northern barbarians was to punish injustice, which means that these ordinary northern barbarians have no idea about the true intention of our army. After seeing Li Jing and Lurk nod repeatedly, Lusu knew that he was right, so he continued to explain, therefore, as long as our army publicizes it to the outside world, the purpose of recruiting young and strong people is to do a good job of publicity. We are not afraid that the people of the northern barbarians will come to surrender. At the beginning, Lusu's suggestion was to passively let others come to the Xayah army, but now he can only take the initiative to increase publicity, beautify the behavior of the Xayah army, and beautify how wonderful it is to work for the Xayah kingdom. I believe that many local people who do not know the truth will voluntarily come to surrender. Very good, Staff Officer Lu said it well. Lurk clapped his hands for Lusu's explanation. When Lusu clasped his fists to signal him, Lurk also clasped his fists to Li Jing and said, General Li, I suggest that the military action be suspended and support be provided for this plan. It is not wrong to suspend the military action, but General Huo in the front has sent a message saying that the cavalry brigade has surrounded the enemy's capital. Suspending the military action now will affect the cavalry brigade's plan. Li Jing still agreed with Lurk's suggestion, but he couldn't drag Huo Kubang in the front. This is easy to do. Lurk immediately came up with a solution and replied, just control the scope of the propaganda. Let's use this small town as the boundary. Suspend the action in the east and let General Huo play his role in the west. Lurk's suspension of action in the east refers to suspending the action of plundering young and strong men, so that the army of Xayah state can behave for a while and take this opportunity to reduce some pressure on logistics. Once this plan came out, after suspending military operations, on the one hand, the pressure on logistics was reduced, and on the other hand, the captured grain could be used to recruit local young and strong people, which can be said to kill two birds with one stone. For wise men like Lurk and Lusu, it is a very unwise behavior to directly use violent means such as the army to gain benefits. If you can use wisdom to gain benefits, it is better not to use violence. This is not only the view of Lurk, Lusu and other councillors, but also the code of conduct of the Xayah state. Now that it can avoid casualties of soldiers and get the desired results, this must be followed. Sun Tzu said, the law of using troops is that the whole country is the best, and breaking the country is the second. The whole army is the best, and breaking the army is the second. The whole brigade is the best, and breaking the brigade is the second. The whole soldier is the best, and breaking the soldier is the second. The whole squad is the best, and breaking the squad is the second. Therefore, winning every battle is not the best of the best. Defeating the enemy without fighting is the best of the best. Therefore, the best army is to attack the enemy's plan, the next best is to attack the enemy's alliance, the next best is to attack the enemy's army, and the worst is to attack the city. The method of attacking a city is to do it as a last resort. It takes 3 months to repair the oars, wheels, and gears, and to prepare the equipment, it takes another 3 months to build the dam. If the general cannot control his anger and the enemy follows him like ants, and 1/3 of the soldiers are killed, but the city is not taken, this is a disaster for the attack. Therefore, those who are good at using troops can defeat the enemy without fighting, take down the enemy's city without attacking, and destroy the enemy's country without taking a long time. They must compete with the world in a complete manner, so that the army will not be defeated, and the benefits can be preserved. This is the method of attacking. Chapter 312 Suffering from. After Lurk and others discussed the final result, they sent a letter to Otherworldly, asking him to act according to his discretion. Lurk, what do you think of the general's letter? Otherworldly passed the letter to Lurk. Lurk quickly read the letter, heard Otherworldly's question, pondered for a while, and replied, General Lee's support for our army is really all out. Otherworldly saw that Lurk was pretending not to understand, so he directly pointed out, of course, the general knows the general's support for our army, and I also know the good intentions of the general and the military advisor, but this is not what the general is asking. General, aren't you asking knowingly? Lurk was a little helpless when he saw Otherworldly insisting on asking him to explain. Since Otherworldly's conversation with him last time, Otherworldly would ask him about everything. Otherworldly was really confused now, and asked, why do I ask this question, even though I already know the answer? General, since General Lee has told us to act with discretion, isn't this saying, let our army play freely? Lurk saw that Otherworldly's doubts were not fake, so he had to speak frankly. Otherworldly suddenly realized and said, so this is what you are talking about. Of course I know this. I'm asking you, Chief of Staff Lurk, whether our army's actions require any support from the army behind us. Provide support. Lurk then realized that he had misunderstood. After reacting, Lurk thought about it and shook his head and said, I know the general's good intentions, but it is not necessary. Since General Lee and military advisor Lurk trust you so much, then the general should just act according to the original plan. Okay, that's well said. After hearing Lurk's opinion, Otherworldly also made a decision. Let's do it this way, and do everything according to the plan. He originally had this idea, but the support of Li Jing and others later made him a little moved, so he wondered whether he should express it with action. So Otherworldly was a little hesitant, and then he came to Lurk to listen to the other party's opinion. Lurk, the staff officer, Otherworldly, who had made the decision, changed his hesitant look and immediately gave a serious order. We must be ready today. The whole army will set out tomorrow morning. Yes, I will obey your order. Lurk was relieved when he saw the Otherworldly now. This was the Otherworldly he knew. The Otherworldly who was emotional and hesitant just now made him recognize the other side of him again. Your Majesty, the Zaire army outside the city has retreated. Aubrey was sitting in the room in a daze. A guard ran into the room panting and shouted to Aubrey very happily. Aubrey had been suffering for a whole day, waiting for the moment when the city was broken. What he didn't expect was that the news of the city's fall did not come, but the news of the Zaire army's retreat came. Aubrey ignored the guard who lost his composure due to excitement. He asked the guard who reported the news in disbelief, what did you say? Say it again. The guard panted and excitedly shouted again, my lord, the knights of Zaire kingdom outside the city have left. Left, good. Aubrey was sure that he was not hallucinating or dreaming. The Zaire army really retreated. He walked around the room happily. When he didn't know how to express his excitement, Aubrey suddenly thought of the Zaire army outside the city. He didn't know why they suddenly retreated. So Aubrey stopped, put aside his happiness, and seriously ordered the guard, go and see why the Zaire army outside the city suddenly retreated. Is there any evil plan? The guard didn't know why the happy lord suddenly became serious, but after hearing Aubrey's order, the guard also knew that this matter was serious, and immediately restrained the smile on his face, saluted Aubrey, and took the order to go to investigate the latest movements of the Zaire army. Before it got dark, the guards rushed into the room in panic again, shouting not good. After seeing Aubrey, the guards immediately reported, Your Majesty, not good. The knights of the Zaire army are attacking the surrounding villages and towns. Aubrey saw the same scene as this morning, but the news he brought was completely different. Attack the surrounding villages and towns? Why attack the surrounding villages and towns? Aubrey was shocked at first when he heard the news, and then he was confused. Anyway, as long as it was not an attack on the city where he would not have such a big sense of crisis. Seeing the calm Aubrey, the guards also calmed down and replied, "Your Majesty, according to the civilians who fled into the city, the knights of the Zaire army are burning villages and towns, and driving away civilians." Those civilians also said. Aubrey was not surprised to hear that the Zaire army was destroying the surrounding villages and towns, and driving away civilians. In his opinion, what else can the army do if it comes to invade? But he was very curious about what the guard wanted to say, but didn't dare to say, so he asked, "What else did they say?" "Yes, Your Majesty," the guard replied, "I heard from the civilians who fled into the city that when the Zaire army knights drove them away and burned the villages and towns, they told them that the Zaire army came here because of what? Hurry up and tell me." Aubrey was very anxious when he saw the guard's hesitation. He wanted to know what the Zaire army said to the civilians that made the guard so hesitant. The guard saw that Aubrey seemed a little angry, and he was so scared that he trembled. He had to answer truthfully. Those civilians said that the reason why the Zaire army came to attack our country was because Your Majesty disregarded the lives of civilians and started wars everywhere to annex surrounding territories, so the Zaire army came to enforce justice. After the guard finished speaking the news he heard in one breath, he lowered his head and dared not look at Aubrey's purple face. Aubrey was really angry and didn't know what to say. Disregarding the lives of civilians? Then your Zaire army burned villages and towns, drove out civilians, and launched a massive attack in his country of Baxter, so you took care of the lives of civilians? He started a war to annex the surrounding territories? Didn't he learn this from your country of Zaire? Why? Now you blame him for going to war? What did he do before? Why didn't you attack the country of Philomet, which is closest to your country in the north? The most ridiculous thing is that justice. Justice? You have the nerve to talk about justice. You should know that the Zaire country came here to ask him for 1,000,000 young and strong slaves. Just like that, you still have the nerve to talk about justice? There are so many things to refute, but Aubrey doesn't know how to clear the blame that the Zaire country put on him. Because what the Zaire country said was the truth, and the civilians saw it, so even if he wanted to quibble, he didn't know what to say. Originally, Otherworldly only planned to destroy the surrounding villages and towns, drive civilians into Baxter City, increase the burden on the enemy city, and make it collapse on its own. But after Otherworldly and Lurk saw the letter Li Jing sent them, Lurk suggested adding one more item to the original plan, strengthening propaganda to local residents. In the propaganda, although the claims of the Baxter Kingdom were true, the behavior of the Zaire army was greatly beautified, so that these ignorant civilians could better accept the behavior of the Zaire army. This was also a way for Otherworldly and Lurk to repay Li Jing, so that these uninformed civilians could go to the rear without worry, and accept the recruitment of the Zaire army. Chapter 313 Return. When Aubrey was still a lord of Dangbo territory, if there was a conflict with the surrounding territories, he would just lead the army and charge forward. There would be no such twists and turns now, which made him dizzy. I really don't know what's wrong with the brains of these Zaire people. Why are they full of conspiracies and tricks? Can't they just fight a battle in an upright manner? When Aubrey thought about it with resentment, he chose to forget that he had sent nearly 200,000 troops to fight against the Zaire army a few days ago, especially the second time. Baxter used 120,000 to fight against the Zaire army of more than 40,000. But it was upright. Even if Aubrey remembered or someone reminded him, he would say that the Zaire army must have used tricks in the battle. Perhaps in the eyes of people in this world like Aubrey, only when two armies face each other, charging together, fighting together, and engaging in a meat grinder-like battle can it be considered upright. For example, the most basic methods of using troops, such as the right time, the right place, and the right people, are all crooked ways in their eyes. When the two armies were facing each other, Li Jing deliberately chose to deploy his troops in the morning with his back to the east and facing the west, just to take advantage of the weather, because the enemy was facing the east and the morning sun was shining directly into their eyes. Not to mention the right place and the right people. Occupying a favorable terrain can greatly reduce the numerical advantage of the enemy. The morale and beliefs of the soldiers on both sides are no longer on the same level. How could they lose? Perhaps in Aubrey's view, the Zaire army spread these news, not only to find a good reason for the Zaire army's attack, but also to irritate him. Because when Aubrey got the news, he was really angry. If Aubrey had a chance to anger the monarch of the enemy country, he would do so. Anyway, there would be no loss. After thinking about it, he was more and more sure that the Zaire army's conspiracies and tricks were really endless. But what he didn't know was that the Zaire army would not be so bored to spread the news just to anger him. What Zaire wanted was to attack the heart. Aubrey must not know what attack the heart is. The so-called killing people and destroying their hearts has two meanings. It is easy to kill people and difficult to destroy their hearts. And it also has two meanings of both killing people and destroying their hearts. But what Zaire wanted was the latter. As time passed, the Zaire army had been in Baxter for more than 4 months without knowing it. Time also came to the middle of June in the 12th year of Cheyenne Key, which was the height of summer. And it was at this time that the army of Zaire was about to embark on the journey back home. Since the war began, the first 3 months were the offensive and plundering stage. But after defeating the largest group of the enemy's living forces on Muilan, and seizing 1 million kilograms of enemy food and grass in Starktown, it entered the second stage. The second stage was the propaganda offensive stage, which promoted that the monarch of Baxter was a ruthless and cold-blooded person, while Zaire was a beautiful country full of hope, wealth and humanity. At the same time, a large number of unaware natives were recruited with the captured grain and grass. When recruiting, Zaire did not distinguish between men, women, and children, but once they were called in, they separated the young and strong natives with various excuses. In the end, only these young and strong natives were selected by Zaire and would be transported to the country. As for the rest of the old and young, they were locked up together and no longer cared about. Lurk walked into the military tent and whispered to Li Jing, who was still studying the map, "General Li, everything is ready." "Oh, it's ready so soon." Li Jing glanced around the military tent, where he had stayed for several months, and said to Lurk, "Then let's do it. Come on, clean up." Lurk received Li Jing's instructions, called out to the soldiers waiting outside, and then walked out of the military tent with Li Jing, came to the open space, and looked at the busy figures everywhere. "Military advisor, I didn't expect time to pass so quickly." Li Jing sighed, put his hands behind his back, turned around and watched the soldiers pack up the military tents. Lurk also sighed first, then smiled and said, "General Li, there is no need to be like this. Everything has gone smoothly since the expedition, thanks to General Li's planning. After returning home, the king will definitely reward you greatly." Li Jing heard this and shook his head and said, "Although Li has some meager merits, this victory is more due to the soldiers' dedication and support from the rear." Lurk nodded first, then shook his head and said, "General Li is right, but we still see the general's contribution, which no one can erase. Military advisor, if the two of us keep flattering you like this, the military tent will almost be packed up." Haha. Li Jing suddenly pointed at the soldiers who had packed up most of the things and were dismantling the military tents, and laughed. Lurk recalled the conversation between the two just now. If they really continued this topic, then time would really pass like this, so he laughed twice to change the subject. Li Jing seemed to have thought of something and confirmed to Lurk, "By the way, military advisor, Li remembers that there should be 150,000 young and strong people sent to the country, right? To be precise, it is 153,854 people." Lurk knew their ultimate goal by heart, so he didn't need to think too much and spoke directly. "Finally, the goal of the king has been achieved, and Li can finally report these when he goes back." Before coming, Li Jing discussed with Yang Song and agreed that the number must not be less than 100,000. More than that, the number we sent back is half more than expected. Lurk was very satisfied with the results of this expedition. Li Jing thought about it, hesitated for a while, and finally clasped his fists to Lurk and said, "Military advisor, Li wants to ask a question. I hope the military advisor will not be offended." "Oh?" Lurk asked curiously, "What can make General Li so hesitant?" Lurk's words agreed to Li Jing's inquiry. "Forget it, Li has figured it out, so I won't bother the military advisor." Li Jing thought about it, but still didn't ask. Just now, Li Jing suddenly thought about whether the extra 50,000 young and strong laborers would bring any adverse effects to the Xia kingdom. But then he immediately figured it out. He didn't need to worry about these things at all. There would be people like Liug and Zhen Yu to handle them for Yang Song. And on the other hand, the reason why Li Jing hesitated for a while and still didn't ask was because in the Xia kingdom, soldiers were not allowed to interfere in government affairs. His question was beyond the scope of his authority and could even be regarded as touching a taboo. Well, since General Li has figured it out, that's a good thing. Liug was somewhat curious about Li Jing's doubts, but since Li Jing had figured it out, he could only give up. Li Jing smiled apologetically at Liug and then changed the subject. Military advisor, has the news of the withdrawal been sent to the cavalry brigade? It has been sent. When Liug heard Li Jing's question, he suddenly remembered another matter he had asked Li Jing for. He took out a letter from his arms and handed it to Li Jing, saying, "This is a reply from General Huo." In the letter, General Huo said that he would not return from the sea with us. Li Jing took the letter, opened it and read it, and asked in confusion, "Why not return from the sea with us?" Liug seemed to have thought of something surprising and amazing, and exclaimed, "General Huo is really young and promising. No one else can come up with such a bold idea." Hearing Liug's praise for Huo Quabeng, Li Jing looked up at Liug in surprise, then lowered his head and continued to read the letter. This general wants to see what new ideas Huo Quabeng has come up with. Chapter 314, Across the East and West. Outside Baxter City, the capital of Baxter State, the cavalry brigade set up a station in a village 5 kilometers east of Baxter City. At this time, the village had completely turned into a military camp, and all the natives had been driven out. In the past month, the villages and towns within dozens of kilometers around Baxter City had long been cleared out, leaving only Baxter City, an isolated city. Huo Quabeng even stopped in this small village openly and took a circle outside Baxter City when he had nothing to do, provoking the enemy in the city. To talk about this matter, we have to start with the increasing number of civilians in Baxter City. At that time, Aubrey received the news that the city could no longer accommodate them, especially when he learned that Baxter City had not much food. He could only order the expulsion of the excess civilians in the city. It was precisely because of this order that Aubrey implemented the propaganda of the Xia army in the eyes of the civilians, so that many civilians who were driven out of the city had no choice but to gather at the Xia state's recruitment site in frustration. Huo Quabeng originally planned to cut off the external information of Baxter City so that it could only enter but not leave, but in the end Liug's suggestion made him change this plan. At that time, Liug also expressed different opinions on Huo Quabeng's plan. "General, Baxter has no soldiers to fight except for this city in front of us, and the blockade is meaningless. It is better to take this opportunity to publicize our army's recruitment to them, so that these homeless people have a place to go." After hearing Liug's suggestion, Huo Quabeng also thought it made sense, so he gave up the blockade plan and let these natives come and go. Anyway, the surrounding villages and towns were almost destroyed by his cavalry brigade, and these natives had nowhere to go. Originally, he planned to use these native civilians to consume the food and grass of Baxter City, but he did not expect that the monarch of Baxter was so cruel that he drove away all the foreign residents in order to let him and the dignitaries in the city live a few more days. In this case, Huo Quabeng did not need to stick to the original plan and change the original plan according to Liug's opinion. Liug suggested this to Huo Quabeng, firstly to win more young and strong men for the Xia kingdom, and secondly, he showed a little compassion for these helpless civilians, so that some of these natives had a way to survive. The most miserable and innocent people are the ordinary people in this world. They are not the private property of the powerful. If they could not provide taxes and soldiers for the forces, their status would be even worse than that of slaves. In the war period, the first to suffer are these ordinary civilians, and they are also the ones who suffer in the end. Just like the current Baxter City, their homes were destroyed, and they were driven here. Now they are expelled from the city again, because they are disliked by their monarchs. They have endless bitter tears, but don't know where to start, and who to tell. After Aubrey learned that the Zaire army did not blockade again, he immediately sent people to let the troops stationed on the border return for support, because the previous 2 deployments had put great pressure on the defense of the soldiers on the border. But who made Aubrey the monarch? After receiving the distress message, the knights on the border gave up the border and returned to support. The Baxter state had a total of less than 300,000 troops, and the total loss was no less than 200,000. The remaining tens of thousands of troops returned in batches. Therefore, all these troops were defeated in batches by a cavalry brigade of less than 10,000 under the command of Okwubeng, and only more than 10,000 scattered defeated soldiers fled into Baxter City. When Aubrey heard the news, he completely gave up struggling and stayed in the city quietly, waiting for the day when the Zaire army was unhappy and flattened Baxter City and even Baxter State. Now all the combat-capable soldiers of the entire Baxter State are in Baxter City, which is also the source of Liuki's words to Okwubeng that there are no combat-capable soldiers. General Lee has ordered the entire army to return home. Are we going too far? Liuki was worried when Okwubeng made a decision and sent his proposal to Li Jing in a letter. Okwubeng patted Liuki on the shoulder and said, "Don't worry, I'm just following orders and returning home. I'm not disobeying military orders." But before Liuki could finish his "but," Okwubeng interrupted him and said, "There is no but. Nothing will happen. Even if something happens, I will bear all the responsibilities." Seeing Okwubeng's words so decisively, Liuki didn't know what to say, but the worry on his face could not be eliminated. Okwubeng also knew that what he said just now was a bit too much, so he comforted Liuki and said, "Liu, you can rest assured. Our cavalry brigade just doesn't take the sea route. Maybe. No, we will definitely return to the country before General Li and others. This Okwubeng is really brave." After reading the letter, Li Jing combined Liuji's words with a little thought and knew what Okwubeng was up to. He shook the letter in his hand and said helplessly, "Since General has done a great deed to establish his prestige for the country, how can I not agree to it? General Li is really broad-minded. I admire him." When Liuji heard that Li Jing agreed to Okwubeng's proposal, he looked at Li Jing with admiration. He was not pretending, but really admired Li Jing's broad-mindedness. If it were an ordinary person who would not follow the mainstream and often put forward unique suggestions that embarrass the commander and not give him a hard time, he would be like Li Jing, who repeatedly accompanied Okwubeng to be willful. Li Jing smiled bitterly and shook his head, explaining the reason. Military advisor Liu praised it. "It's because although General is willful, he also knows a limit and knows what to do and what not to do. He knows the general situation. If he hadn't been so willful, I really wouldn't have known that Okwubeng was a young man." Haha, General Li is really insightful. Liuji heard Li Jing's words and then looked at his helpless look and couldn't help laughing. Okwubeng didn't want to go back from the sea with Li Jing and the others, so there was only one way to go, which was the land route, and the land route could only cross the Baxter Kingdom, then pass through 2 small territories, and finally borrow the Philomet Kingdom, and return to the Zaire Kingdom from outside Shanhaiguan. At first glance, the distance is only about 400 kilometers. At the speed of the cavalry brigade, as long as dry food is prepared, it will take no more than a few days to complete. But this road is not so easy to take. Not to mention the seemingly defenseless Baxter State, even the several territories that serve as a buffer between Baxter State and Philomet State. The combined power cannot be underestimated. Not to mention that there is also the Philomet State behind, which is friendly on the surface, but actually has small plans. If the cavalry brigade really wants to pass this road from Shanhaiguan back to Zaire State, it must be prepared to pass through 5 passes and kill 6 generals. When Okwubeng got Li Jing's consent and reply, he led the cavalry brigade on this destined extraordinary journey home. On the way back, the actual difficulties were much simpler than expected. They passed through various forces very smoothly without any difficulties. On the contrary, when the cavalry brigade passed by those 2 territories, the local lords even sent the cavalry brigade supplies and wine, and showed their courtesy. Can you blame them for being spineless? In the past 6 months, as long as they are not blind or deaf, which of these surrounding forces does not know that Zaya State sent troops to Baxter State and used less than 50,000 troops to beat the huge Baxter State without the ability to fight back? Now a group of knights from Zaya country is going to pass through their territory on their way back. Do they dare to disagree? Do they dare to make things difficult? I'm afraid it's not a lesson for Baxter country. Therefore, when the cavalry brigade crossed 4 forces in the east and west, took countries, and 500 kilometers to return to Shanhaiguan, Zaya country, passing through Gihua city, it attracted a crowd of onlookers. Zhao Yi even led the officials, soldiers, and civilians of Zaya country in the city to welcome and see off the cavalry brigade in the passage. Chapter 315 Return to Zaya Kingdom. Yang Song was also surprised when he learned that Huo Kubang led the cavalry brigade across multiple forces and returned to Zaya from outside Shanhaiguan. But after being surprised, he was full of excitement and pride. Huo Kubang was indeed a famous general who sealed the wolf and lived in Zhu. In this world, Zaya had no northern barbarians that needed to be conquered, but Huo Kubang still accomplished such a feat. It is really a great achievement that will be recorded in history and passed down through the ages. Even if Zaya went to war with other generals in the future, there would be no dazzling glory that Huo Kubang has now. Order Huo Kubang to lead the cavalry brigade back to Xianqi city. Yang Song was in a daze for a moment, then came back to his senses, looked at the intelligence in his hand, smiled at Chen Ping who came to report the news in person, and ordered, "Come back to accept the honor they deserve." "Yes, my lord, I will go now." Chen Ping was also very happy and bowed to Yang Song. He also wanted to meet this young and promising general very much. "Wait, when will Li Jing and Liug be able to return?" Yang Song stopped Chen Ping who was about to leave and asked about the itinerary of the rest of the expeditionary army. Chen Ping turned to Yang Song and replied, "Because there are so many soldiers going on the expedition, there are limited domestic transport ships, and it is expected that all will return in 2 months. Just like the original expedition, it took 3 months to transport 24,900 soldiers and 30,000 militiamen to Baxter. But in the eyes of the enemy, these militiamen were also Zaya troops. The entire army of more than 50,000 soldiers approaching Baxter put Aubrey under great pressure. Give orders, all soldiers must be brought back before October." It was already the last few days of June. Yang Song thought of the future plan and ordered Chen Ping to pass on the order. Chen Ping calculated the time, accepted the order and said, "Yes, my lord. There is still plenty of time now, and all the soldiers will be able to return by mid-September at the latest." "That's good. It's time for that plan. You can ask Zhang Yu and others to prepare in advance." Yang Song gave Chen Ping another order and waved his hand to let him go to work. On the 9th day of the 9th month of the 12th year of Xianqi, the last batch of militiamen arrived at Heijin town by boat, which meant that the 9-month expedition came to an end. Li Jing and Liug personally welcomed the last batch of militiamen who arrived at the shore at Heijin town and watched the last person get off the boat and go ashore. "It's finally over." Li Jing stood in the port and looked at the many ships docked at the port. He couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. He finally completed the task assigned to him by Yang Song. All that was left was to make a summary report to Yang Song again. Liug also breathed a sigh of relief and said, "Yes, it's over. The next step should be to reward the meritorious service. I would like to congratulate General Li in advance for his military merit." Liug said and saluted Li Jing with his fists. "Military advisor, you are joking." Li Jing clasped his fists and saluted in return, shaking his head and saying, "Li has nothing to congratulate. I just hope to avoid mistakes." Speaking of military merits, General Huo is the most prominent one this time. Liug smiled and said, "General Li is too modest." Although General Huo has made brilliant achievements, it is said that those who are good at fighting do not have outstanding achievements. Therefore, the battles of good fighters have no extraordinary victories, no wisdom, and no bravery. Isn't this what you are talking about, General Li? Huo Kubang was very active on the battlefield, letting people at home and abroad know that Zaya State had a cavalry with extraordinary combat power. but without Li Jing's unified command and Li Jing's consent, how could Hu Okubang be active? Liug, under the order of Yang Song, went to war with the army as a military supervisor and chief of staff, but he participated in the war throughout the whole process. How could he not know what Li Jing did? See your majesty. That afternoon, Li Jing and Liug rushed to Xianqi city and reported to Yang Song that the army had all returned home. After listening to the two's reports, Yang Song stood up and raised his hand to the two and said, "Pharmacist, Bo Wen, you have worked hard on this expedition. This is a duty." Seeing Yang Song's respect for the virtuous, the two hurriedly bowed and said yes, yes. Yang Song hummed, sat down, and then continued, "This expedition brought back 150,000 young and strong laborers for our country. With the remaining 50,000, 200,000 young and strong laborers, we can start the construction of the Xianshan Railway. The Xianshan Railway, which is the railway from Xianqi City to Shanhaiguan, is 700 kilometers long. This expedition is to obtain cheap labor for this railway. Replying to your majesty, the manpower for the Xianshan Railway is sufficient, but as far as I know, the country's steel production is far more than enough to support it." Liug bowed to Yang Song and said that the construction of the railway still had difficulties. By the end of the 11th year of Xianqi, Xia's steel production had reached 110,000 tons, which was about 1/10 of a million tons. "I know, so I decided to divide 100,000 of the 200,000 laborers into iron or mining to increase steel production, and the remaining 100,000 laborers will first build a railway from Xianqi town to Xianqian Pass." Yang Song did not do nothing during the time when the army was on the expedition. He discussed with Zun Yu and others and made many decisions and plans. Yang Song asked Li Jing, in addition, "Pharmacist, are you surprised that I did not prepare a triumphal ceremony after the army returned from this expedition?" Yang Song decided to tell the two of them about his next plan. When Li Jing heard this, he immediately clasped his fists and bowed his head and replied, "I dare not. It is all up to the king." Liug also immediately clasped his hands and asked, "Your majesty, is there any change in the country?" "Haha, don't worry." Yang Song waved his hands at the two again to show that nothing was wrong and said, "There is no change in the country. It's not that I don't know the victory of this expedition, but there will be changes in the country next." "May I ask what changes are there?" Liug was very curious about Yang Song's words. What kind of change could be more important than the victorious army? Although Li Jing on the side did not say anything, his ears did not mean that he really didn't care. Yang Song smiled mysteriously and said, "It's not a big deal. It's just that the country is going to upgrade again." Upgrade? Liug and Li Jing heard this word, looked at each other, a little confused. Yang Song saw the two people's puzzled look and suddenly felt funny and couldn't help laughing so hard that the two looked down at their own clothes, wondering if there was anything strange that could make their king laugh so much. Yang Song laughed even harder when he saw the two of them, but he didn't laugh for long. After all, he could only laugh secretly. He restrained his smile and said seriously, "I will be crowned king next month." The military data in chapter 98 was wrong and has been corrected. The next chapter is a little late, please forgive me. In addition, I wish you all a happy new year. Chapter 316, The Time of Becoming King. On the 10th day of the 10th month of the 12th year of the Xianqi reign, the city of Xianqi was sunny and the sky was clear. In the council hall, the tables and chairs used for political affairs had been cleared away. Civil and military officials dressed in new court robes and stood in neat and solemn rows on both sides, facing each other. At exactly 8 o'clock in the morning, as 3 deep bells rang from the bell tower, Liug stood in front of the hall and shouted, "The auspicious time has arrived. Please welcome the monarch. Please welcome the monarch." The ministers bowed and saluted at the top of the main hall, shouting in unison. As soon as the ministers finished speaking, Yang Song, wearing a black dress with red edges and gold patterns, and a flat-top 12-bead curtain crown on his head, slowly walked out from behind the wall, stood in the middle of the stage, faced the ministers, raised his hands, and said in a serious voice, "No need to be polite, everyone." The minister shouted again, "Thank you, your majesty." Then they stood up and waited for Yang Song's instructions. I received the order from heaven to open up wasteland and build a city to support the people. I have worked diligently and never slacked off. Today, there are tens of millions of people and the granaries are full of grain. I hope you will work with me to create a prosperous era. Your Majesty, I obey your order. Your Majesty is wise. After Yang Song finished his speech, Lurk shouted again in front of the hall, "Ministers, please give your opinions." Your Majesty, I have a suggestion. Zhenyu followed the procedure and walked to the middle of the hall first, facing Yang Song and bowed. Aloud, Yang Song raised his right hand slightly. Zhenyu said, "Your Majesty's merits and virtues are witnessed by all the people in the world. I ask your Majesty to ascend the throne and set an example for the world." Your Majesty, I second the motion. As soon as Zenyu's voice fell, the ministers turned around and bowed to Yang Song. After declining twice, Yang Song said, "Since this is the will of the people of the world, I will take the throne." This scene is all procedures. It was agreed upon at the court meeting on September 10th. After a month of preparation, today is Yang Song's enthronement ceremony. The monarch is on the throne. The ceremony of offering sacrifices to heaven begins. Lurk faithfully acted as a singing official. The monarch is going to the temple of heaven. Following Lurk's voice, Yang Song walked out of the council hall first, and the ministers behind him followed one by one. There was no figure on the east, west and north-south main streets in front of the council hall. There were only the gorgeously dressed Jinaiwei guarding on both sides of the street. Yang Song boarded his exclusive imperial carriage in front of the hall, pulled by 8 pure white war horses. With Wang Wen's go, the carriage slowly went to the altar outside the south city. Many ministers followed on foot, and then a large group of Jinaiwei, holding flags and banners. Outside the human wall formed by the Jinaiwei, all kinds of people were also dressed in gorgeous new clothes, solemnly watching the ceremony, witnessing the entire process of Yang Song becoming king. At 8:50 in the morning, Yang Song moved to the outside of the Temple of Heaven, dismounted and stood in front of the altar steps. At this time, the altar had been renovated, surrounded by a wall and a large open space, and a supporting building was built in the corner. At exactly 9 o'clock, a sound of beating was heard from the city, and Lurk shouted, "The auspicious time has arrived, and the coronation ceremony has begun." Yang Song then stepped onto the altar and performed a ceremony to offer sacrifices to the sky. After reading the words of sacrifice to the sky, written by Zhuz, Yang Song stood on the altar, facing the many subjects under the altar, raised his hands and declared loudly, "I'm the king, and I hereby announce it to the world." The subjects bowed in unison, "Your Majesty." After that, there were endless cheers, fireworks and firecrackers bloomed, and the sound of salutes continued. Yang Song got on the imperial carriage again, and returned to the council hall. Wherever he passed along the way, the people cheered, flowers and ribbons flew in the air, presenting a scene of universal celebration. When Yang Song stood in front of the gate of the council hall again, he looked at the subjects below and said loudly, "Today I ascend the throne, and the whole world should celebrate." After that, he ordered Lurk, "Let's start." "Yes, my king." Lurk said that he had received the order, and then he announced loudly, "The king has ordered that the military review ceremony begin." "I obey the order." Li Jing stood up and saluted Yang Song with his fists, then turned to the side, picked up the flag, and pointed it to the sky, and ordered, "The king has ordered that the military review begin." Dong dong dong, the sound of war drums sounded, and the scene was quiet again at some point. The army that had been lined up for a long time on the east side of the east-west avenue began to move. They walked over in neat steps and sonorous and powerful. The first square formation was the flag guard square formation, which was composed of Jinaiwei equipped with swords. There were only one battalion of 300 people, lined up in 12 rows. In front of the flag guarding square, there were 2 Jinaiwei guarding a flag bearer in the middle. The flag in the flag bearer's hand was the national flag of Xia State, the red-bottomed golden dragon and auspicious cloud flag. When the Jinaiwei walked to the front of the hall, after Li Jing shouted salute, they drew their swords in unison, stood in front of them, and turned their heads to look at Yang Song on the steps. When the swords were unsheathed, there was a sound of clang, and the shining sword light shone everywhere, making the people who were staring at them couldn't help but squint their eyes. The cold light of the sharp blade filled the air, and Yang Song nodded gently. He put his left hand behind his back, stretched out his right hand, and waved gently at the square below. Next was the square of the Shenjiang, with shining breastplates, tightly grasped muskets, and walked over in the same goose step. When passing in front of the hall, they raised their guns in unison, and with a wow sound, they were full of power. There was no explanation, only Li Jing stood on the high platform holding the command flag, and gave orders loudly, and only the army phalanx was accompanied by the neat stepping sound of the war drum, and the rhythm seemed to step on people's heartbeats, which made people fascinated. The Shenji camp was arranged to go in the second sequence, because the muskets represented the future development direction, and the Shenji camp was also the first army to set foot on the enemy's land during the last expedition. After the Shenji camp, it was the phalanx of the Imperial Guards. There were 7 phalanxes in the Imperial Guards, each with 300 people. The first one was the heavy armored phalanx, composed of heavy infantry and heavy shield soldiers, with heavy infantry in front and heavy shield soldiers in the back. Next was the melee phalanx, composed of sword and shield soldiers and long spear soldiers, with sword and shield soldiers in front and long spear soldiers in the back. Next was the long-range attack phalanx, composed of strong crossbow soldiers, and archers. The heavy cavalry phalanx, light cavalry phalanx, field artillery phalanx, and siege artillery phalanx came on stage one by one. The arms of the Imperial Guards represented the mainstream of the Tsar army. The phalanxes took turns to appear, which made the onlookers exclaim with excitement. One after another, it was a feast for the eyes. The regular brigade came on stage later, and there were also 7 phalanxes. The order of appearance was no different from that of the Imperial Guards. However, when it was the turn of the cavalry brigade, there were only 5 phalanxes. After all, the cavalry brigade only had 2 arms, light cavalry and heavy cavalry, so each battalion of the cavalry brigade had to send out a phalanx and mix the 2 types of cavalry. After the 5 cavalry phalanxes of the cavalry brigade was passed, there was a militia phalanx, a conscript brigade, that did not go on the expedition, and the city guards responsible for guarding. Each of these 2 armies symbolically sent out a phalanx. The last to appear were 3 phalanxes sent by the navy. One was a sailor phalanx equipped with muskets, and 2 naval gun phalanxes. There were a total of 41 phalanxes. After they passed one by one, it was almost noon. Finally, when all the phalanxes had finished walking and rearranged, Lurk picked up a scroll and unfolded it, and read it aloud beside Yang Song. From the initial 300 soldiers to the current army of more than 40,000, from resisting the southern barbarians to the recent expedition, plunder, war, the development history of the Tsar army and the history of war are accounted. In addition to reflecting the development process of the Tsar country for officials and civilians, this also puts a complete end to the plunder war that just passed. After all, it is not easy to publicize the foreign plunder war, so this can be regarded as a kind of compensation. Chapter 317 Upgrade Organization. When Yang Song announced his accession to the throne at the altar, a pleasant reminder sounded in Yang Song's ears, but the situation at that time did not allow him to look closely. Now after the military parade, Yang Song returned to the council hall and sat on the throne. When he watched Lurk read out the reward on his behalf, he focused on the system and looked through the system prompts at that time. Ding. Congratulations to the host for completing the main task 1. Get the reward, Xianshan Railway. Xianshan Railway? Yang Song was very surprised when he saw the task reward. Isn't this the most important project of Tsar Kingdom at this stage? Why was it directly rewarded to him? Yang Song looked through the description of the main task 1 again. Main task 1, establish a large rear area. Completed. Establish a stable rear area to prepare for the development of a new world. Conditions, King. 5 million people. Perfect system. Task reward, unknown. Reward Xianshan Railway and complete supporting facilities. The task that appeared at the beginning has undergone some changes. The first is the addition of the 3 words completed. Moreover, the conditions for completing the task appeared later, becoming a king, a population of 5 million, and a perfect system. Except for the newly completed becoming a king, the rest had already been completed. Yang Song was shocked when he saw the conditions of this task. He didn't expect that becoming a king was a necessary condition for completing the task. If he had known earlier, he would have done it earlier. Why wait until now? However, Yang Song did not regret it. Anyway, the task reward was very powerful. It seemed that the task reward, originally marked as unknown, should be determined according to the current situation of his power. Thinking of this, Yang Song secretly thought, if this task was completed later, would the reward be more generous? But he shook his head immediately. There is no such good thing in the world. Now in the system taskbar, only 2 tasks of the main task 2 have not been completed. One is the final task of glory to China, and the other is a staged task of dominate one side. What does the king have to say? Lurk just finished reading the reward, and saw Yang Song shaking his head. Yang Song came back to his senses and said, "This is how the reward is. I know your efforts and I will not treat you unfairly." Yang Song ignored the minister's thanks and thought about how to receive the task reward he had just received. Just when Yang Song had just made up his mind, Lurk said, "Your Majesty, should we announce the promotion of the administrative establishment?" "Announce it?" Yang Song saw that he had something else to do, so he put the reward aside for the time being. Moreover, according to the system's convention, there must be hidden rewards, so it would be good to deal with them all. After he figured it out, Lurk bowed to Yang Song and said he accepted the order, then turned around and unfolded another scroll and read it aloud. Because the territory and population of Xia State have reached a sufficient scale, Your Majesty orders that all administrative establishments in the country be promoted by 1 level. The original department level will be promoted to department level, and the original bureau level will be promoted to department level. The chief officers at all levels will be promoted in turn. This announcement was about the promotion of the central court's rank, which meant that the original administrative department, military department, intelligence department, etc. were all promoted to administrative department, military department, and intelligence department. Some departments, such as the Imperial Hospital and the Zhuangzhengyuan, which were originally at the bureau level, have not changed their names, but have been upgraded to the department level. For local administrative divisions, the original county has been promoted to county, the original town has been promoted to county, and some prosperous villages have been promoted to town. Lurk read out the promotion of local administrative divisions. Upon hearing this, Yang Song added, "New villages will be established around the town, so that the people can use all the idle land." "Yes, my king, I obey your order." The ministers accepted the order and said yes. Yang Song said this because the land of the Xia kingdom has not been fully developed and utilized. There are a lot of wilderness between the original villages, especially in the counties and towns in the south. Because the coastal basin was developed first, the original wasteland is still a wasteland. Only the city guards patrol regularly to see if there are any resurgences of the southern barbarians. So after the coastal basin has been developed almost completely, Yang Song decided to develop both the north and the south at the same time, and no longer focus on the coastal basin in the north. The Linhai Basin is still sparsely populated, and it has only focused on developing the land left by the former territories. The plains in the east of the Linhai Basin alone are 200,000 square kilometers. There are now 4 counties, promoted to counties, with a population of more than 4 million, which averages out to nearly 50,000 square meters per person. Not to mention that the peninsula Xia State south of the Xianqian Pass has occupied nearly 300,000 square kilometers of land. With a population of more than 4 million, on average, there are fewer people per square kilometer. If calculated by the controlled area, the border drawn by Yang Song for the Xia State, excluding the sea area, the 500,000 kilometer Linhai Basin and the 200 square kilometer peninsula add up to a vast area of more than 2.5 million square kilometers. In fact, less than 1/10 of it has been used. Therefore, the most important thing for Yang Song at this stage is to build the existing land and make more full use of it. After all, such a vast land cannot be wasted like this. The 4 counties of Linhai or Linhai County, which owns Linhai Port in the northeast of the basin, and Linhai County, Dai County, and Zhengdao County, The 4 counties at the northern foot of the Cheyenne Pass have 4 counties, namely Nangawan County, Dongbeo County, Xiling County, and Tongbai County. Ziggy County, which has a large number of iron ore in the western mountainous area of the basin, has 3 counties, Liangshan County, Ziggy County, and Ningxian County. Finally, the land of the original Shangdaoling, located at the southern foot of Shanhaiguan, has been developed by the Xia Kingdom, but it has just been established. Bidao County has 3 counties, Bidao City, Shanhai County, and Huchuan County. Among them, Huchuan County has a large Huchuan Lake. There are a lot of barren land between these 4 counties in the Linhai Basin, which is also one of the targets of Yang Song's next development plan. There are only 3 counties south of the Cheyenne Pass, which were also promoted from the original counties, namely Cheyenne County in the northeast corner of the peninsula, where Cheyenne City is located, Hunan County in the southwest, and Antang County in the northern Tongdao mountain area. These 3 counties, except for Cheyenne County, which has an additional Cheyenne City, all have 3 counties. The industrial military port of Cheyenne County, the timber and animal husbandry of Hunan County, and the commercial and mining industries of Antang County each have their own characteristics. After all, this is the real base camp of Xia State, so it has been planned in detail and reasonably. In addition to these counties, there are Cheyenne Pass and Shanhaiguan Pass, which are directly under the central government, Gihua City, a trade window to the outside world, and Phelang Island and Fugi Island, 2 resource islands overseas. The scattered islands overseas are all assigned to Phelang Island for management. Phelang Island is at the county level in terms of administrative level, and Fugi Island is at the town level. There is also an overseas enclave that actually exists on Yang Song's small map, but is ignored by many ministers. Sanayagang Town on Bingsu Island. This is a town owned by Xia State today. If you're listening to this novel on a channel other than Fanfic World, it means they downloaded and uploaded it without effort. We cordially invite you to visit our channel, Mundo Fanfic Novelos. There you'll find the original version of this story and you can explore many other novels of various genres. We're waiting for you to immerse yourself in a world of incredible novels. Chapter 318, Skydrop Railway. October 10th was a busy but fulfilling day. That night, Yang Song held a dinner in his mansion and entertained important ministers of the Xia Kingdom. Xiaolan and Xiaojian, as well as Yang Xian and Yang Yan, attended the dinner with Yang Song. Yang Song is now 30 years old. He has reached the age of 30, and his children are 7 years old. They go to ordinary schools like ordinary children, but there are extra classes waiting for them every day after returning home. It is a blessing and misfortune for them to be born in a royal family. Although they do not have the usual worries of ordinary children, they have pressures that others have never had, as well as responsibilities that they are born with, and they have to work several times harder than ordinary children. The eldest prince has been so smart since he was a child, and he will definitely be a wise king in the future. Yes, the eldest prince is smart, and the eldest princess is also very smart. I would like to toast the eldest prince and the eldest princess. I will drink first. Yang Song sat on the upper seat, with 2 women sitting on each side, holding 2 children in their arms. From time to time, ministers came to toast the 2 children. At this time, the 2 women would smile and nod slightly, and Yang Song would take the wine glass on behalf of the 2 children and happily take a sip of the wine in the glass. These ministers were also smart people. They knew that it was more convenient to compliment Yang Song's descendants than to compliment Yang Song, the king of a country, which made Yang Song even happier. After all, complimenting Yang Song directly would easily be regarded as a flatterer, and complimenting the 2 women was even more inappropriate. There was nothing to worry about with only 2 young children. Your Majesty, Xia State is now on the next level, thanks to your wisdom. I would like to toast you. Liug stood up from his seat and raised his glass to Yang Song from a distance. Yang Song took a sip of the fine wine and smiled slightly, saying, "In this remote place in a foreign world, I only hope that the people can live a stable life, have enough food and clothing, and have convenient travel and accommodation. In the future, if Xia State stands on the top of the world and becomes a celestial country, I will have no regrets in my life. Your Majesty is wise." Hearing Yang Song's words, the ministers immediately stood up and bowed. After the minister sat down, Lurk continued, "Since the king has this heart, we will follow him until death and offer our humble efforts to the king and the country. We will follow the king until death and work hard until death." The ministers stood up again and shouted in unison. In addition to celebrating Yang Song's enthronement and entertaining the ministers to comfort his hard work, this dinner also had the meaning of welcoming and celebrating the generals who returned from the expedition. There was a banquet for the ministers in the palace, a flowing banquet outside, and a big meat and wine in the military camp. The fireworks bloomed in the dark night without stopping, turning the entire SYNOPSIS city into a city that never sleeps. The original Lord's mansion became the monarch's mansion after Yang Song became the king, and then to the current palace, but the name has changed a bit, and it is actually still the small courtyard. Although some ministers suggested expanding the palace to show the majesty of Yang Song, the monarch and king, Yang Song refused all of them on the grounds that the Xia kingdom was more important. After all, the scope of SYNOPSIS city is only so large. Outside the palace are various government offices and important buildings. If the palace is to be expanded, SYNOPSIS city must be replanned, and even the entire 1 kilometer long and wide city wall can only be turned into a palace. Although a 1 kilometer long and wide palace is nothing, Yang Song thinks that it is putting the cart before the horse to spend money and effort to relocate the people, just for his family of 5, just to build a palace that can only be used to show his majesty. Maybe the thinking of the previous world is still affecting him, making him look at everything based on pragmatism, and he is still unclear about the meaning of the majesty of a king. It's not that there are no ministers to tell him, but the current Xia kingdom is in a period of great development, so Yang Song chose the people between the two. In short, Yang Song's idea is that now is not the time to enjoy and engage in formalism. The necessary dinner, from King Yang Song to the ministers, and from the maids and guards, this day can be said to be extremely tiring. The Xianshan Railway rewarded by the system includes stations and supporting facilities along the way. How to choose still needs to be discussed with Zun Yu, Lurk and others, so he did not choose to receive the reward directly. Now back in the room, lying on the bed dizzy, Yang Song decided to think about these things tomorrow. He really couldn't hold on now. If he hadn't been thinking about the system reward, he would have fallen asleep as soon as he came back. It was not until the afternoon of the next day that Yang Song completely recovered. Even if no one dared to persuade him to drink, he drank a little too much from time to time. Yang Song summoned all the ministers, and after the greetings, he explained directly, "But when are you? Oh, I summoned you here today because the Xianshan Railway has already been built, so you can discuss the relevant details." The Xianshan Railway has already been built. Lurk and others were shocked at first, and then they immediately understood. They looked at each other and replied in unison, "Congratulations to the king for receiving the gift of heaven." Yang Song saw that several people understood immediately, so he spared his explanation. Anyway, he was the king, and it was difficult for him to explain the matter, so he didn't plan to explain it. After the discussion, Yang Song chose to receive the reward on the system interface. Then, there was nothing else. Only a received mark was displayed on the system interface. He was not asked to make a choice or make any decision. He only needed to choose whether to receive the reward. Yang Song also reacted. It turned out that he was overthinking. There was no room for him to manipulate the system reward. If he had known this, he would not have wasted a day to discuss. After thinking it through, Yang Song shook his head helplessly. He had no way to deal with this system. He stood up and said to the people in front of him, "Let's go and see the newly completed Xianshan Railway." As he said that, he walked out of the door first and went straight to the location of the station reserved in the North City. As for Yang Song, he was sure that this was one end of the Xianshan Railway, because this was their plan for the Xianshan Railway. Since the name of the system reward was Xianshan Railway, the name of the railway named by Yang Song, it must be in accordance with their plan. This is also what he just figured out, why there is no room for choice, because the choice has been made long ago. Arriving outside the North City, there really appeared a large Chinese-style building covering a vast area at the station. The 3 conspicuous words "SYNOPSIS Station" can be seen clearly from a long distance. The appearance of this station is familiar to Yang Song. He has seen it on the blueprint drawn by the Bureau of Industry. This is the system that directly realizes the things on the drawing. Stepping into the station, the wide hall, the ticket window on one side, the waiting room on the other side, and the entrance in the middle. This familiar layout makes Yang Song feel both cordial and fresh. There is no electronic display screen, no automatic door, only a conspicuous clock above the entrance to remind passengers. The rest depends on the ability of the operation and management organization established by Xiago. Entering the waiting platform, the wide platform makes Yang Song very satisfied. The rails full of industrial atmosphere are arranged in parallel, waiting for the train to stop. Oh, there is a train? The moment he entered the platform, Yang Song saw a train parked on the platform. Without Yang Song's instructions, the accompanying Jinaiwei commander Wang Wei waved his hand and several Jinaiwei rushed onto the train to conduct a safety check. Chapter 319 New Construction. After the Jinaiwei's investigation, Wang Wei reported to Yang Song, "Your Majesty, everything is normal on the train, and there is no one." Yang Song hummed and walked into the train compartment through the open door. What caught his eye was a luxurious restaurant. White curtains, exquisite landscape paintings, and exquisite carvings, showing exquisite and grand decoration. It is obvious that it is not something that ordinary people can afford. A layer of silk tablecloth was laid on the black and red dining table made of unknown wood, and a white jade vase filled with flowers was placed on it. Yang Song walked through the restaurant and entered the next carriage. He saw that this was a rest and entertainment carriage, with chess tables, piano tables, bookshelves, and incense burners. There was even a large fish tank at one end, and several koi fish were swimming in it. Next is the study and office carriage, with office chairs, pens, inkstones, paper, and inkstones, bookshelves and desks. How comfortable it is to arrange it. The next carriage is for rest. The wide and comfortable bed occupies a large part of the carriage, and there is no shortage of wardrobes and dressing tables. From the beginning to the end, this train is not ordinary, and it looks like a royal carriage prepared for him. The king, sitting on the sofa in the reception car of the train, feeling the comfort of his body, Lurk couldn't help but sigh. "Your Majesty, this is the royal carriage." The military advisor is right. This is the royal carriage. Your Majesty can take this car to tour the world. Zhen Yu, who was sitting beside him, kept nodding. When Yang Song heard the word tour the world, his heart moved. Yes, in the past, transportation was not convenient, and he could only stay in the weather city to preside over the overall situation. Now that there is a railway, he doesn't have to be trapped in one place for a long time. When Ruo's words are very much in line with my wishes. Yang Song resisted the urge to set off immediately, thought for a while and said, "Give orders and arrange for someone to be in charge of this car. I will tour Shanhaiguan soon." He also wanted to take a trip on his own, but he was the king of a country after all, and he couldn't leave whenever he wanted. He had to make some arrangements. "Your Majesty, will you inspect the Xianshan Railway before conducting the inspection?" Zhen Yu saw Yang Song's excited look and wanted to slap him twice. Isn't this digging a hole for himself? Lurk immediately agreed. "Yes, Your Majesty, the Xianshan Railway has just appeared. Whether it is safe and smooth is unknown. I also suggest that you wait for the railway to operate for a period of time before you go north for inspection." Yang Song heard what Zhen Yu and Lurk said and knew that he was too abrupt and too hot-headed, so he immediately calmed down and replied, "Okay, complete the inspection as soon as possible and get the Xianshan Railway on the right track." After returning to the study in the palace, Yang Song asked a new question. Now that the Xianshan Railway is already there, where will the 200,000 young and strong laborers be used? The original purpose of the plundering war was to plunder a large number of cheap and disposable laborers to build the Xianshan Railway. Who knew that the system actually gave him a surprise? A task reward solved the most important project of Xia State for him. Then these numerous young and strong native laborers will be temporarily useless. It is impossible for the Xia Kingdom to support them for free as it advertised to the outside world. Lurk and Zhen Yu must have considered this issue. Now that Yang Song asked, Lurk immediately replied, "Your Majesty, since the Xianshan Railway is already there, let's move on to the next stage of construction." I second the motion. Zhang Yu continued, the original plan was to increase the country's population to 30 million within 10 years, with an annual steel output of 1 million tons and the completion of the Xianshan Railway. After seeing Yang Song nodding confirmation, Zhang Yu continued, now that the Xianshan Railway is already there, I suggest that the other goals remain unchanged, and the railway construction plan be changed to the construction of the railway branch. Liug did not speak when he heard Zhang Yu's words, but just nodded his agreement. After all, Zhang Yu was the chief executive, and as a military advisor, he only needed to make suggestions and fill in the gaps. Railway branch line. Yang Song suddenly realized when he heard this. Yes, the north-south main road is already there, so why not build a branch line? For example, connect Ningxin County, which produces a large amount of iron ore, with Linhai County, which has a seaport, so that iron ore, coke and other minerals can be quickly transferred to where Zaya State needs them. As expected, seeing that Yang Song had some doubts, Zhang Yu explained. For example, if we build a railway between Ningxin County and Linhai County, and a railway between Xianqi City and Heijin Town, so that the land can connect to the sea, and the country's resources can flow smoothly from north to south, it will definitely speed up the country's development progress. Zhang Yu's words coincided with Yang Song's thoughts. At this time, Liug also agreed with his face and said, Director Zhang is right. The construction of a railway branch is exactly what our country should do in the next stage. Not only that, the construction of the branch requires no less steel than the Xianshan Railway. In this way, the country's 10-year plan of 1 million tons of steel production will also be put to use. After listening to Liug's words, Zhang Yu added, what the military advisor said is very true, and the construction of the branch is not like the Xianshan Railway. We can first build important branches in a targeted manner. Because the branch is shorter, the demand for steel is also less, so there is no need to wait until 1 million tons of steel is produced before building it. Liug nodded in agreement when he heard Zhang Yu's supplement, saying, that's right. The branch line doesn't need to wait for 10 years. Significant results can be seen in recent years. Yang Song listened to the two of them talking. You supplemented my plan, I supplemented your suggestions, and in a few words, the plan for the next stage was perfected. He finally instructed, when are you when, since you both think that the task of the next stage should be done this way, then list a charter and put it forward at the court meeting. Yang Song said this because this plan was just a discussion among a few of them. Such a big thing must be discussed at the court meeting. This is also a way for Yang Song to stick to his principles. Yes, my king. Liug and Zhang Yu bowed their hands and accepted the order. They both knew that such a big thing, even if a decision was made, it must be notified in place. The railway completed in one go must have left the post office under the administrative department, unprepared and insufficient manpower. Finally, according to Liug's suggestion, the conscript brigade sent soldiers to take over some simple positions on the railway, and trained a large number of people to take over those positions that required technology. Fortunately, after 10 years of universal education, Zaya State now has a large number of people with basic knowledge and a large number of talents with certain knowledge. Through high salaries and high benefits, a large number of people have been attracted to participate in this railway, which has solved the current urgent need. Otherwise, it would be embarrassing to have a railway, but not be able to operate it. It took a month to take over the entire railway. After it was fully operational, it was the end of the 12th year of Xianqi. Chapter 320 New Organization. After Yang Song finished looking at the station, he returned to the palace and began to check the hidden rewards of the mission. He carefully opened all the interfaces of the system, but did not find anything extra. He did not give up and directly ordered people to check all the abnormalities, of course, except for the most conspicuous Xianshan Railway. Yang Song is the king of a country, so he does not need to do everything himself. He only needs to give an order. Not long after, Li Jing came in person to report that he found an abnormal place. What? There is an extra production line in the military factory? What kind of weapons are produced? Yang Song was very happy to receive the report. This should be the hidden reward of this system reward. Li Jing clasped his fists and replied, "Yes, my king." Zhuang Wei from the equipment department reported that there was suddenly an extra musket production line in the military factory. "It's great that it's a musket production line." Yang Song was even happier when he heard that it was a musket production line. If it weren't for the fact that Zaya's musket production was all handmade and the production capacity was very limited. After the Plunder War, the power of the musket was verified, and he ordered the whole army to change its equipment. Before Yang Song could finish his words, the Imperial Guard suddenly knocked on the door and came in to report to Yang Song, "Your Majesty, Dean Shen Kuo wants to see you." Announce. Yang Song let Shen Kuo in, and Shen Kuo brought him good news. "Your Majesty, I have found something." After Shen Kuo greeted Yang Song, he reported directly, "Since I received the order from Your Majesty, I wondered if there was anything new in the library. Since you are here to see me now, does that mean something new has appeared?" Yang Song looked at Shen Kuo expectantly, waiting for his answer. "Yes, Your Majesty, I found a new book in the military data storage area on the 7th floor." Shen Kuo said as he handed the book in his hand to Yang Song with both hands. In fact, when Shen Kuo entered the door, Yang Song saw the book he was carrying, but he didn't pay attention to it at first. He didn't expect that this inconspicuous book was also a hidden reward this time. As for why Shen Kuo could find such an inconspicuous new book from the vast sea of books in less than a day, Yang Song didn't have the energy to think about it, nor did he want to pay attention to this point. It seems that it is just to mobilize the power of everyone. Yang Song took the book, and the 4 big words firearm training code on the cover caught his eyes. The conspicuous 2 big words firearm made Yang Song have a guess. Yang Song suppressed his heart that was about to jump out of his chest, flipped through the book twice, and saw that there were indeed pictures of musketeers in it. Without looking at it more, he closed the book and handed it to Li Jing and said, "Pharmacist, take a look at this book." Li Jing clasped his fists and said yes, and took the book from Yang Song with both hands. When Li Jing saw the name of the book, his face changed, and then he quickly opened the book and read it carefully page by page. It was not until Yang Song had changed several cups of tea that Li Jing stopped flipping through the book, closed the book, and respectfully handed the book back to Yang Song with both hands. As for Shen Kuo, he had already left. Yang Song put down the teacup in his hand, stopped reviewing the documents in his hand, pointed to the books on the table, looked at the excited Li Jing, and asked, "What is recorded in this book?" Li Jing clasped his fists to Yang Song and replied excitedly, "Your Majesty, this training book is a military book. To be precise, it is a military book used to train and form a firearms army." Yang Song thought to himself that it was indeed so. When he saw the title of the book and roughly flipped through the pictures, he combined it with the news of the arsenal brought to him by Li Jing, and he had a guess. Now this guess has been confirmed by Li Jing, a military expert, which makes up for the last shortcoming in Yang Song's imagination. "Pharmacist, tell me the content of this book in detail." To be cautious, Yang Song decided to listen to Li Jing's explanation of this military book. Li Jing clasped his fists and saluted, paused for a moment, as if he was organizing his words, and then answered, "Your Majesty, the military book records a set of military organization, which is very different from the current military organization of our country." "Military organization? Tell me about it." Yang Song didn't expect Li Jing to start from this point, and he didn't expect that there would be content about military organization in this military book. He thought it was only about the training methods of musketeers. It seems that his caution was very correct. "Yes, Your Majesty," Li Jing explained. "The current military organization of our country is from low to high: squad, squadron, battalion, brigade. A squad has 12 people, and the strength of a brigade is 7,800 people. Li Jing first gave a very simple introduction to the current military organization of Xia State, and then continued to explain. The organization recorded in this military book is divided into 6 levels: platoon, company, battalion, regiment, brigade, and division. According to the records in the military book, platoon is taken from the meaning of a row of musketeers, which is the same as the number of people in a squad currently in our country. Li Jing elaborated after the general description. A company means continuous volleys of gunfire. A company has 5 rows, totaling 60 people, which allows the muskets to fire continuously. A battalion has 5 companies and a battalion headquarters, totaling 350 people, led by a captain, and assisted by a military marquis. A regiment has 5 battalions, with a regiment headquarters, totaling 2,000 people, led by a lieutenant, and assisted by a military marquis. A brigade has 5 regiments, also with a brigade headquarters, totaling 11,200 people, led by a major general, and assisted by a staff officer. A division has 5 brigades, with a division headquarters, totaling 62,000 people, led by another lieutenant general, and assisted by a military division commander. In addition, Li Jing frowned, hesitated for a moment and said, "There is another level above the division, called the army, but the military books do not record it in detail, and it is noted that it can be organized as needed." After listening to this long series of reports, Yang Song compared it with the existing organization in his mind, and found that the brigade level recorded in the military book mentioned by Li Jing was 1 level higher than the current brigade, and the number of people was also far more than the existing organization. One was 7,800 people, and the other was 11,200 people. The difference was very obvious. Yang Song thought about the organization of the musket troops, and it was definitely different. After all, the combat methods of muskets and cold weapons were completely different. Oh, that's it. Yang Song quickly went through it in his mind and asked, in the opinion of the pharmacist, how about this organization? Is it reasonable to use it in the musket troops? When Li Jing heard Yang Song's question, he did not answer immediately, but pondered. He was probably thinking about the pros and cons in detail. This chapter is a bit late, sorry. Chapter 321 Preparation Details. After a long time, Li Jing came back to his senses from his thoughts. He saw that Yang Song was already processing official documents, and hurriedly clasped his fists and said, "Your Majesty, please forgive me. I was so rude." "It's okay, go on." Yang Song stopped what he was doing. He understood. After all, he asked such a question too hastily. After all, Li Jing had just come into contact with this new system. "Yes, Your Majesty." After thanking him, Li Jing said what he had just been thinking about. "Your Majesty, I think the organization in the military book is more suitable for the musket army. As for how suitable it is, we can only know after actual training." Li Jing thought for a long time, and of course he thought of more than just this. He just continued, "According to the military book, musket soldiers are a kind of general purpose soldiers with a very wide range of uses. They are mainly used for long-range combat, and supplemented by close combat. They are enough to replace strong crossbows, bows, and arrows, spears, swords, and shields and other types of soldiers. In addition, it is applicable both on land and on ships, especially at sea. Our country uses muskets in an all-round way." According to the battle report brought back by General Li Bao from the trip to the Northern Territory, muskets are very convenient weapons. When Li Jing said this, he thought of the Shenji battalion that Yang Song had formed for this purpose, so he gave an example to illustrate. "Let's take the battle example of the Shenji battalion. I know that compared with other long-range attack arms, its demand for logistics is much less. Although it still requires a lot of ammunition, it is much more convenient than the 4 types of arrows of the long-range attack arms. In the future, Director Yang of the Security Hall will report that the logistics pressure of the Shenji battalion is much less than that of the ordinary army for the same battalion. This is good news." The proof obtained from actual combat made Yang Song very convinced, but he wanted to know if there were other advantages and disadvantages of the musketeers, so he asked, "Are there any advantages and disadvantages?" "Your Majesty, there are still some." Li Jing replied, "I learned from this military book that the training of musketeers is much more convenient and faster than that of bows and crossbows. Even a farmer who knows nothing and cannot read can have the strength to fight after less than 3 months of training." As for the disadvantages, Li Jing said, without much hesitation, he immediately said, "The most important thing is that, because gunpowder is afraid of water, muskets cannot be used for long-range attacks on rainy days, and can only be used for close combat." Yang Song learned some of the latest news, and finally summoned Liug, the Imperial Military Advisor, Yan Ren, the commander of the Shenji camp, Yang Ren of the Habeo Hall, and other ministers of the military department to discuss. Pharmacist, tell everyone about the organization of the Musket Army. Yang Song asked Li Jing to explain the latest news to these ministers. Li Jing first explained to the ministers what he had just said to Yang Song, and then he also said something that he had not said just now. This organization is divided into these levels vertically, but there are several types of organization horizontally. The army at the division level is divided into 3 types: standard division, heavy division, and cavalry division. Li Jing continued to explain, the brigade and regiment below it also have these 3 types. The battalion level below it has 3 types of organization: standard battalion, cavalry battalion, and artillery battalion. The company and platoon have 4 types of organization: infantry, cavalry, artillery, and siege. Before everyone asked questions, Li Jing immediately gave a detailed explanation of these organizations. The infantry company and platoon are all composed of musketeers, and the cavalry company and platoon are also all composed of musketeers and cavalry. The artillery is still the existing artillery in our country. The standard battalion is composed of 3 infantry companies, 2 cavalry companies and a battalion headquarters of 50 people. The cavalry battalion is composed of 5 cavalry companies and a cavalry battalion headquarters. Even a clerk in the cavalry battalion headquarters is equipped with a warhorse. The artillery battalion has 3 artillery companies, 2 siege companies and a battalion headquarters. That is the same as the standard battalion, with a total of 30 field artillery pieces and 10 siege artillery pieces. After Li Jing finished talking about the grassroots organization, he went on to talk about the middle level organization. The organization at the regiment level is very different from that below. That is, the regiment level is a basic combat unit of the army, which is fundamentally different from the current battalion level in our country, which is the basic combat unit of the army. In fact, in terms of organization, there has been a big difference starting from the battalion level, but what Li Jing said is not wrong. The basic combat unit has been upgraded from the current battalion to the regiment level, and the number of people has also increased from 1,500 to 2,000. The standard regiment is composed of 3 standard battalions, a cavalry battalion, a artillery battalion, and a regimental headquarters of 250 people, with a total of 30 field artillery pieces and 10 siege artillery pieces. The heavy regiment is composed of 2 standard battalions, 2 artillery battalions, a cavalry battalion, and a similar regimental headquarters, with a total of 60 field artillery pieces and 20 siege artillery pieces. Such a large number of artillery configurations is also the origin of its name. The cavalry regiment is composed of 5 cavalry battalions and a cavalry regimental headquarters. It is generally not set up separately. Its cavalry regimental headquarters is all cavalry, just like the cavalry battalion headquarters. In addition, no matter what kind of organization, the number of people in each regiment is exactly 2,000. After Li Jing finished talking about the regimental organization, he went on to talk about the brigade organization. The number of people at the brigade level is a total of 11,200, which is a very large gap from the current brigade level 7,800. After all, there is a difference of 3,400 people, but the generals who command them are the same as the current ones, with the commanders of the rank of Major General and the staff officers of the rank of Colonel. Hearing Li Jing say this, the generals present became happy. After all, who doesn't want to have more soldiers under their command? The standard brigade consists of 5 standard regiments and a brigade headquarters of 1,200 people, with a total of 150 field artillery and 30 siege artillery. The heavy brigade consists of 3 standard regiments, 2 heavy regiments, and the same brigade headquarters, with a total of 210 field artillery and 70 siege artillery. The current military organization of Xia State is also divided into regular brigades and heavy brigades, but the sources of the names are essentially different. Regular brigade means ordinary brigades that can be formed in large numbers, which is similar to the standard brigade of the musket troops, but the meaning of the heavy brigade is completely different. Xia State currently has only 1 heavy brigade, the Imperial Guard, and the regular brigades are distinguished according to the number of heavy infantry in the army. According to Li Jing's explanation, the organization of the musket army is distinguished by the number of artillery. The cavalry brigade is also composed of 5 cavalry regiments and a cavalry brigade headquarters. The entire brigade is full of cavalry, without any infantry or artillery. Therefore, the cavalry army can only be used in field battles, and is not easy to be used for siege. Li Jing only said that the cavalry is not easy to attack the city. If you encounter an ordinary small city, it is more than enough to use muskets and gunpowder to attack the city. Seeing that Li Jing did not continue, Yang Song remembered that Li Jing said that there is a division level above the brigade level, so Yang Song ordered, "Pharmacist, tell me about the detailed organization of the division level." "Yes, my king." Li Jing felt that the division level organization was too large and was not suitable for the current Xia kingdom at all, so he did not prepare to give a detailed explanation. But now that Yang Song asked him to explain, he had to continue explaining. In fact, the organization of the division level and the brigade level is similar. The composition of the standard division, heavy division, and cavalry division is the same as that of the brigade, except that the total number of people has become 62,000. Although Li Jing said so, he still gave a detailed introduction. Chapter 322, Upgrade. Pharmacist, this is the organization of the army, but what about the application of tactics? After listening to Li Jing's introduction on the organization of the new army, Yang Song asked him to introduce the combat methods of the musket army. "Yes, your majesty." Li Jing accepted the order and replied, "Because the new army uses muskets and artillery as weapons, its combat methods are also different. It is very similar to the Shenji camp under your majesty's command." When Yanren heard that the Shenji camp he trained was different from the one in the military books, he couldn't help but ask, "Similar? General Li, I wonder what is the difference between the Shenji camp and the new army?" "Don't worry, Commander Yan, I will explain in detail." Li Jing replied to Yan Ren, and then said, "The biggest difference between the Shenji camp and the new army is the number of people. All my colleagues know that the number of troops determines the use of tactics." After seeing that everyone nodded in agreement with his words, Li Jing continued, "Therefore, the difference between the Shenji camp and the new army's combat methods is that the new army is at least a regiment of 2,000 people." After listening to Li Jing's words, Liug said with enlightenment, "I see, the Shenji camp only has 1,500 people, a difference of 500 people, so the combat methods and the scale applicable during combat are not exactly the same." Yang Song also understood that, in simple terms, the organization of the Shenji battalion and the new army is different, and the number of enemy troops they face is also different. If the Shenji battalion can fight against 3,000 enemy troops, then a regiment of the new army can fight against 5,000 enemy troops. Don't underestimate the difference of these 2,000 people. Many times, it is this difference that makes the commander make two different decisions. In this case, can the entire army of our country be reorganized into a new army? Yang Song finally threw out his original intention. When he got the hidden reward of the system, he had this idea. Finally, after everyone's discussion, it was decided to reorganize the entire army again, and change the clothes of the entire army at the same time. However, it was not done overnight. After all, this reorganization was different from the previous one, only the organization was different, and this time the reorganization even changed all the weapons and equipment. It must be retrained, and the officers must re-enter the military academy for training. So under Li Jing's suggestion, it was decided to start with the reorganization of the Imperial Guards led by Zhao Wu, which was still a heavy brigade, and it could be regarded as an experimental army. In addition, Yang Song's direct army, the Shenji Battalion, was cancelled. The entire Shenji Battalion was merged into the Imperial Guards. After all, the personnel of the Shenji Battalion were selected. Even so, according to the organization of the new army, the number of the new Imperial Guards was still insufficient, and they had to be selected from the entire army again. Yan Ren was transferred to the military academy as an officer training instructor because of his rich experience in commanding and training musketeers, and his rank was promoted from colonel to major general. The firearms training code was copied under the order of Yang Song, and each middle and senior officer was given a copy to study hard. Of course, before the Imperial Guards formed combat effectiveness, the rest of the army remained unchanged for the time being. in order to allow the Imperial Guards to form combat effectiveness as soon as possible. It was a very good method to merge the Shenji Battalion, which had experience in using muskets, into it. In addition, in the new plan of the Xia Kingdom Army, it was decided to organize the army into 2 standard brigades, a cavalry brigade, a standard brigade level city guard, a Imperial Guard directly under Yang Song, and a regiment level Jinaiwei directly under Yang Song. Among them, in addition to cancelling the Shenji camp, the original conscript brigade was also cancelled and reorganized into the 2nd brigade, commanded by Yan Ren. This is also the reason why Yan Ren was transferred out of Yang Song's direct army sequence and promoted to the rank of Major General. As for the replacement of new and old soldiers, a recruit training camp was established, which was in charge of the military department's military hall. This was because Li Jing suggested that he had too many duties before the transaction, and he often couldn't take care of the conscript brigade. The recruit training camp is only used during the annual recruitment period. After 3 months of recruit training, the recruit training camp is closed again. Qualified recruits are assigned to various armies according to their grades. The best of course enter Yang Song's direct troops, the second one enters the ordinary army, and the worst enters the city guard sequence. As for the number of recruits to be recruited, it is determined based on the number of veterans that year, so there is no definite number. In Xiaoguo's latest plan, the total number of the army has reached 58,000, which is 16,000 more than the original 42,000, which is considered to be an expansion of the original 2 brigades. In June of the 14th year of Xianqi, as the last reorganized city guard, the last battalion completed the refitting and reorganization. After a year and a half of reorganization, the army of Xia State has officially entered the era of muskets. The scale of the army of 58,000 people finally made Xia State stronger, and all the troops were equipped with muskets, and the combat effectiveness was completely incomparable. If the army of Xia State in the cold weapon era could fight 10 people at once, then the new army today could fight 30 people at once, or even more. In other words, according to Aubrey's calculation method, Xia State is equivalent to having an indigenous army of 1.74 million. An army of such strength is more than enough to sweep across many forces outside the pass, but it is easy to capture and difficult to rule. After all, the actual number of troops in Xia State is still less than 60,000. Because the popularity of muskets has made the consumption of gunpowder in Xia State more serious, in order to make the production of gunpowder keep up with the consumption of the army, the indigenous labor force of Feilong Island has increased to 100,000. In addition to the military, the administrative system upgrade took less than a year in this year and a half. The total population of Xia State had reached 13 million by the end of the 13th year of Xianqi. According to Zenew's calculations, at this rate, the population of Xia State will reach the planned 30 million at the latest in the 17th year of Xianqi. In terms of railways, in addition to the Xianshan Railway, the branch road from Ningxin County to Bidao City in Bidao County was completed by 100,000 young and strong indigenous laborers. This branch road is 270 kilometers long and consumes a huge amount of steel. But everything is worth it because Ningxin County has a large amount of iron ore. Before this branch road was built, it was all horse-drawn carriages that transported iron ore and steel from Ningxin town. Now that the Bining Railway branch road is completed, Ningxin County can be built into a second industrial county, an industrial base focusing on steel products, coke, coal, iron ore, equipment, personnel. The fast and convenient logistics have truly connected the north and south of Xia State, without distinction. All of this was achieved thanks to the hard work of hundreds of thousands of young and strong indigenous people. Therefore, the Xia Kingdom did not abuse them. In addition to freedom and intense work, their food, clothing, housing and transportation were much better than before they were outside the Great Wall. For this, many indigenous people were grateful to the Xia Kingdom. Chapter 323 The current situation of Xia country. At the end of the 14th year of Xianqi, after the mid-year court meeting, Yang Song returned to the study to sort out the information. In terms of population, the population of Xia State has reached 17 million, which is one step closer to the goal of 30 million. In terms of counties and towns, Xia State has a total of 7 counties, including 25 counties directly under the jurisdiction, 2 passes and 2 islands. The number of villages and towns is even more than 100. In terms of science and education, there are 2 military academies, 2 universities, 1 high school in each county, 1 middle school in each county, 1 primary school in each town, and 1 elementary school in each village. In terms of production, agriculture, animal husbandry, textile industry, smelting industry, and minerals are all thriving. Among them, several crops such as black beans in this world have gradually become non-staple food because the people of this country have gradually accepted them. The system can finally recruit refugees with the food of this world. In terms of economy, Gihua City is the only window for Xia State's import and export, which has brought a lot of benefits to Xia State. The country's business is working hard with the efforts of various factories and merchants, and tax revenue has been steadily increasing year by year. The total fiscal revenue in the 14th year of Xianqi is 26 million taels of Xia currency. In terms of construction, the most prominent feature of water conservancy and transportation is the rise of railways, which opened the eyes of the people of Xia State. The newly recruited people are completely unaccustomed to the life of Xia State today, which requires the government to provide some basic common sense training to them after recruiting refugees. In terms of power, Xia State already has several machine manufacturing factories. As more and more machines and equipment are produced, steam engines have spread all over the north and south corners of Xia State, allowing steam equipment to be used in all walks of life. In the direction of steel, in the 14th year of Xianqi, Xia State's steel production has soared to 460,000 tons. Among them, 160,000 tons were expanded within half a year after the construction of the Bening Railway. From this, we can see how much role convenient and fast transportation plays in the development of productivity. In terms of the Navy, the exploration fleet and the offshore defense fleet have been fully established, with a total of 1 super battleship, 2 battleships, 4 fast battleships, 8 cruisers, 9 destroyers, 15 frigates, and 6 supply ships. The number of combat personnel is 7,400, and the total number is nearly 10,000. In terms of the army, Deking led the 1st Brigade, Yanren led the 2nd Brigade, Hu Okubang led the Cavalry Brigade, Zhang Wei led the City Guards, Zhao Wu led the Imperial Guards, and Wang Wei led the Royal Guards. There were 6 armies in total, with a total of 58,000 people. The number of militia and reserve personnel on the register reached more than 1 million. In terms of intelligence, Yang Yi, who was responsible for domestic intelligence, had the most work to ensure that no one dared to go against Yang Song's will. For foreign intelligence, Chen Ping established a complete intelligence system south of the Balong River, so that every move of the forces outside the pass could not escape the eyes of the Xia Kingdom. In terms of justice, the constitution was revised and improved. Because Yang Song became king, the wording of the constitution in this regard was revised. The improvement was mainly about some provisions of the industrial age. After reading these summarized information, Yang Song saw that the conscripted refugees were no longer adapted to the current life of the Xia Kingdom. If it were not for the goal of 30 million, he would have thought of reducing, or even stopping the conscription of refugees. The 10-year policy of encouraging childbirth has led to a rapid increase in the number of newborns in Xia State every year. Of course, the fiscal expenditure in this regard has also increased every year. In addition to the cost of training newly recruited people, Xia State's finances have never had a surplus for so many years. Moreover, with the rapid increase in Xia State's population, Yang Song's private property development speed has been unable to keep up with the development speed of Xia State's education. Under necessity, Yang Song decided to use most of the profits of state-owned assets for the development of education. As for Yang Song's private property, under the advice of Yang Zhang, it was decided to expand the industry so that Yang Song, the king, could have more property to control. It's like the minister suggested expanding the palace. Yang Song didn't have enough money, and the finance didn't have extra money for construction, and Yang Song didn't want to use the government's taxes for these places. Every penny of fiscal revenue has its use. With the current situation of Xia State, there are so many places to spend money, but there is no deficit. it can be seen how strong the fiscal capacity of Zhang Zhuzheng, who is responsible for finance and taxation, is. You must know that the growth of wealth is not as simple as starting a printing press. Its essence is just an external expression of productivity, a quantification of resource ownership. Therefore, even if more banknotes are printed, it is useless, and it will only cause inflation and financial crisis. Regarding inflation, Zhang Zhuzheng once suggested that there would be no problem, as long as the annual inflation rate was controlled within 10%. At that time, Yang Song asked what the pros and cons were, but Zhang Zhuzheng's answer made him give up this behavior of cutting leaks. At that time, Zhang Zhuzheng's explanation was very technical. Simply put, the advantage of controlling the inflation rate at 10% every year is that it can stimulate economic development and allow the Xia Kingdom to have an additional 10% of taxes every year. Such a good advantage is certainly not without disadvantages. The disadvantage is that the purchasing power of paper money is getting less and less, and money is becoming less and less valuable. In other words, 10% of the people's wealth is ruthlessly plundered by the government every year. For example, 1 or 2 Xia coins could buy 500 kilograms of rice last year, but this year it can only buy 475 kilograms. It seems that there is not much change, but in fact, the 25 kilograms of rice were confiscated by the government. It is equivalent to adding an invisible tax with the change in the value of the currency. When Yang Song got the pros and cons of this, after repeated thinking, he finally decided not to use this method to solve the problem of insufficient finances in Xia state. He also wanted to build Xia currency into a strong currency. He didn't want 1 or 2 Xia coins to only buy 1 kilogram of rice after 100 years. Because he believed that, as long as he worked hard to develop productivity, it would be sooner or later to solve the financial problem, and there was no need for this method at all. From the last plundering war, Xia state discovered a very serious problem. The maritime transportation capacity was very insufficient. It was just that 30,000 militiamen and more than 20,000 troops were transported from Xia state to Baxter state, which was only separated from Xia state by a mountain range. The sea route was only 1 or 2 days away, but it took 3 months. So when building the fleet, Yang Song ordered the development and construction of a large transport ship specially used for transportation, which could transport materials in peacetime and transport troops in wartime. After having a full set of sailing warship drawings, such a requirement was not difficult at all. Not long after, the Institute of Science and Technology drew the design drawings. After construction verification, this large transport ship was determined. Ship level, large transport ship. Specifications: 65 meters long and 15 meters wide. Full load displacement: 4,500 tons. Carrying capacity: 500 tons or 1,000 lightly armed soldiers. Crew: 50. Mainmast: 4. Hull composition: a total of 5 floors. 1 superstructure is used for command and residence at the rear of the cargo ship. The hull is divided into 4 layers. Large cargo can be carried on the open deck. The second, third and fourth layers are elevated storage layers, and the first layer is a ballast and leak-proof layer. This large transport ship is a type of ship between super battleships and battleships. The Academy of Science and Technology originally wanted to make a slight change to the drawings of the super battleships, but after demonstration, it was found that it was not possible at all, so it had to refer to the redesign. After all, battleships are used for combat, not for transportation, and there are many compromises in the design of storage. Therefore, the newly designed large transport ship reduces the number of decks, increases the distance between decks, expands the shaft, and installs steam-powered cranes to facilitate the loading and unloading of materials. Chapter 324 Continued Development. If the steam power system for large ships had not been developed, Yang Song would have wanted to build ironclad ships directly. Of course, ironclad ships are not only about power, but also about ship structure, new naval guns and other technologies, so Yang Song can only fantasize about this. The various artillery rewards from the system are very different from the primitive artillery in his impression, the most obvious of which is the artillery material and effective range. Logically speaking, this kind of artillery that uses black powder as propellant is mostly made of bronze, but the artillery of Xiago is actually made of special steel. And the range is completely inconsistent with the name of black powder. It is more like a more advanced special propellant. After all, an effective range of at least 900 meters is not easy to achieve, and the precision involved is not commensurate with this era. The muzzle accuracy is measured in 0.01 millimeters. The amount of gunpowder filled for firing is also very large. The standard propellant of a field artillery of only 90 millimeters is actually 5 kilograms, which means that there is a long section in the barrel filled with gunpowder. This is why there are such high material requirements and precision requirements. If it weren't for the advent of the steam age, which significantly increased the speed of Xi's artillery production, Yang Song could only significantly reduce the proportion of artillery. In fact, compared with the infantry brigade rewarded by the system at the beginning, the proportion of artillery in the army has dropped a lot. In the past, Deking's infantry brigade had only 3,500 people, but the artillery had 81 field artillery and 36 siege artillery. Even a standard brigade of 11,200 people now has only 150 field artillery and 30 siege artillery. The number of people is 3.2 times that of the past, but the number of field artillery has only increased by less than 1 time, and the number of siege artillery has even decreased. In addition to the fact that the entire brigade is equipped with muskets, the bigger reason is that the number of artillery is enough. Field artillery is set up to attack local soldiers, and siege artillery is used for siege. Too many artillery may not always work, but on the contrary, it will delay the mobility of the army. After Liching and others testing and confirmation during this period of time, it was found that the new army organization is more practical, flexible, and more conducive to attack. At this time, Yang Song thought about it and found an important problem. That is, the system reward at the beginning was biased towards defense, just like the infantry brigade at the beginning, which was a defensive army. Otherwise, an army of 3,500 people had more than 100 artillery pieces. If they attacked hundreds of kilometers away, they would be exhausted. But now, the newly reorganized army is a completely offensive army, with a large organization and a moderate number of artillery. This is not the appearance of a defensive army. Isn't this telling him that Xiago has passed the defensive stage and can start to expand? Yang Song gathered these divergent thoughts and returned to the matter at hand, an application for him to decide whether to relocate the military factory. This application was submitted by the administrative department. The book said that the military factory was built in the inner city of Xianqi City. The noise and smoke were very loud, and there were shops around, which had seriously affected the surrounding residents. When Yang Song saw this application, he was not worried about whether he should relocate the military factory, but he was lamenting that time had passed so quickly. Back then, a small city of Apocalypse was not fully populated, with large tracts of vacant land. Only 14 years had passed, and Apocalypse City had expanded a lot. The buildings originally planned were no longer suitable for the new layout, especially within the 1 kilometer long and wide city wall. If it weren't for the minister's proposal to use the entire 1 kilometer long and wide inner city as a royal palace, it is estimated that the current Apocalypse City would have demolished the original city wall for the convenience of transportation. The 1 kilometer long and wide royal palace is already very large, and it has a complete city defense system, and the moat is also ready. It is very good to serve as the future royal palace wall, but Yang Song did not agree, and had to give up. However, Yang Song did not completely reject it, so when Zanu developed Apocalypse City, he moved all kinds of buildings in the inner city outward, gradually vacating the inner city, so that when the expansion was needed, it could be carried out immediately. For example, a new government street was built in the outer city, and the area outside the city wall was planned, and functional areas were divided. Where is the commercial area? Where is the residential area? These are all being carried out simultaneously, waiting for the future. 1 square kilometer, that is, 1 million square meters, 1,500 acres of area are all used as the royal palace, which is larger than the 720,000 square meters of the Forbidden City. But Yang Song's plan is that, even if the inner city is completely transformed into a royal palace, most of it will only be built into various functional buildings, such as the Institute of Science and Technology, the library, and even Yang Song wants to build a top university in the palace. There is no wall outside the expansion of Qianqi City. Basically, except for the first few towns and Gihua City outside Shanhaiguan, the rest of the towns in the entire Xia Kingdom have no walls. After all, in front of the current military strength of the Xia Kingdom, it doesn't matter whether there are ordinary city walls or not, of course, except for the two passes, which are the focus of defense. Yang Song annotated the word agree on the application with a red pen. As for where the military factory will be relocated, it depends on the arrangement of the military department. He then opened the next book and read it. This was a memorial written by Li Bao about building an ocean-going fleet. It stated in the middle that the two planned fleets had been built, and it was time to build an ocean-going offensive fleet with a total of 50 warships. Yang Song did not immediately approve this application, but put it aside in an area marked to be discussed, preparing to discuss with Zhang Zhuzheng, Li Jing, and Liug before making a decision. In Yang Song's view, the current navy of Xiago is already strong enough, and there is no need to build a more powerful fleet. In fact, it is not that Yang Song does not want to, but that he cannot. Because even if the current navy of Xiago has an annual maintenance cost equivalent to 3 new standard brigades of the army, this has not yet calculated the sky-high construction cost. You must know that the entire navy, including various clerks, is less than 10,000 people and 42 large and small warships, and among them, medium and small warships below cruisers account for 29. If an ocean-going fleet with large warships accounting for half is built, I don't know what an astronomical figure the maintenance cost will be. Originally, Yang Song wanted to reject the memorial directly, but he wanted to see what additional opinions Li Jing, Liug and others had, so he put it in the discussion area. Next, Yang Song dealt with the expansion of the steel plant, the increase of native labor for mining, and the addition of new villages and towns, all of which were official business related to the development of the Xia Kingdom. After he finished dealing with today's affairs, he looked up and found that it was almost dusk. The day had passed unknowingly. Yang Song stepped out of the study and stood in the corridor to see his two children doing something in the pavilion in the garden below. He curiously went downstairs and walked into the pavilion. He watched closely and found that they were practicing calligraphy. The two children, who are now 10 years old, are in their second year of primary school, which is a good age for learning. Zaina, you write the word well. Yang Song's sudden voice made the two children who were practicing calligraphy seriously look at him. Chapter 325, Traveling with Relatives. Father. Yang Xian was very happy to see Yang Song coming. He wanted to call him father, but thinking of Zhuzi's teaching, he put down the paper and pen, stood up and bowed to Yang Song respectfully, saying, "Meetings, father." Before Yang Song could recover from Yang Xian's change, Yang Yan hugged his thighs and said, "Father, father, sister, don't be rude, come and meet your father." Before Yang Song could say anything, Yang Xian's young face pretended to be serious and scolded Yang Yan. "No. Father, hold me." Yang Yan acted coquettishly to Yang Song, ignoring Yang Xian at all, and asked Yang Song to hold her in a tender voice. Yang Song bent down and picked up Yang Yan, scratched her nose lightly, causing Yang Yan to giggle. Yang Xian, who was standing on the ground, looked at her with envy. "Zaina, who taught you all these?" Yang Song asked Yang Xian curiously. Why did he suddenly become respectful and polite? If it were in the past, he would probably hug his thighs like Yang Yan and hug him. Yang Xian retracted his envious eyes, bowed to Yang Song like a little adult, and said, replying to father, "It was teacher Zhu who taught me." This Zhuz. Yang Song shook his head helplessly, but he couldn't say anything about it. But he felt that the current situation made it impossible for him to enjoy the joy of having children like ordinary families. "Hey." Yang Yan made a face at Yang Xian in Yang Song's arms, which made Yang Xian very unhappy. He didn't care about what the teacher taught him, and rushed up to hug Yang Song's thighs, unwillingly saying, "Father, look at my sister. Zaina, you are the brother, you should give in to your sister." A gentle voice sounded behind Yang Song. He turned around and saw that it was Xiaolan and Xiaojuan who came over accompanied by several maids. Xiaojuan stretched out her hands to Yang Yan in Yang Song's arms and said, "Jaina, get off your father, mother." Yang Yan shouted when she saw Xiaojuan and obediently turned to Xiaojuan's arms and shouted to Xiaolan beside her, "Auntie." Yang Xian bowed to Xiaolan and Xiaojuan respectively. Greetings to mother, greetings to second mother. Because Yang Song did not have a strong sense of class, he did not ask his family to follow the rules, otherwise the family would have to bow to each other when they met, which would be meaningless. "You are here." Yang Song greeted the two women. "Greetings to the king." The two women bowed to Yang Song together. When Yang Song saw the two girls like this, he said helplessly, "Why are you two like this too?" "He king, this is a courtesy to you." Xiaojuan put down Yang Yan in her hand and said to Yang Song with a smile, "Otherwise, someone will say that I don't know etiquette." "Sister, how can you speak to the king?" Xiaolan lightly reprimanded Xiaojuan and then said to Yang Song, "Hasn't your husband become the king? We two sisters have thought that we must not let the ministers look down on us. You guys." Yang Song knew that the two girls were doing this for his own good and he was very moved. He sighed and then said, "Don't worry about what others say, I'm the king anyway, and they have to listen to me." "Yes, king, I understand." Seeing Yang Song's look, the two girls pretended to pay their respects to Yang Song, and then they couldn't help laughing, and Yang Yan and Yang Xian saw that their parents were happy, so they also laughed along. After the daily routine, Yang Song said to his family, "I will inspect the north gate in 2 days and plan to take you to the north to play for 2 days. You should be ready." "Going to the north to play? Great." Xiaojuan was so happy that she almost jumped up when she heard this. She has been a mother for many years and her personality is still the same as before. Compared with Xiaojuan's excitement, Xiaolan considered more and asked with some concerns, "My lord, would it be bad for me to go with you?" Yang Song heard Xiaolan's considerate words and thought about him and everything. The soft part of his heart was very touched. He waved his hand and said, "Don't worry, it won't have any impact." A few days later, Yang Song arranged the affairs in his hands and took his family on the train, rewarded by the system, and embarked on a journey to the north. Along the way, Yang Yan and Yang Xian chatted non-stop, and even Xiaojuan participated in it, making the whole journey full of laughter and joy, and making Yang Song's journey to the north less boring. He secretly thought that it was a very correct decision to bring his family. This was the first time that Xiaolan and Xiaojuan had stepped out of Qianqi City. Although Yang Song did not treat the two girls like in the ancient world, who could only stay in the palace, the two girls were very considerate and only moved around in Qianqi City. Thinking of this, Yang Song immediately felt a sense of guilt, which made him look at his family more tenderly. The careful Xiaolan saw the change in Yang Song's expression and immediately asked softly, "My king, what's wrong with you? Are you feeling uncomfortable?" "No, nothing." Yang Song smiled slightly and waved his hand, saying, "I was thinking that you have suffered a lot over the years, and I don't have much time to accompany you. You are the king, you must not only take care of us, but also consider the world." "I know all this." The more considerate and indifferent Xiaolan was, the more guilty she felt towards him, a person from another world. Yang Song took a deep breath, looked at the scenery passing by outside the train window, and said sorry and thank you to his family in his heart. "My king, this train is so long and big." Xiaojuan came over from one end of the carriage with the two children, and excitedly told her about the royal train. When they first got on the train, Xiaojuan and the two children were a little restrained and didn't dare to move. Especially when it started, Xiaojuan was a little scared. She couldn't understand how such a big and long steel monster could run. When the train was running smoothly on the railway, Xiaojuan saw the scenery passing by outside the window, and she couldn't imagine that this so-called train could run so fast. This was a world she and they had never known. Although they had heard Yang Song's description of the train and thought that the train was a longer and bigger carriage, they found out how big the gap was from their guesses after seeing it with their own eyes and experiencing it. Not long after, Xiaojuan's lively personality came up, holding Yang Song's hand, and a basket of questions were thrown out at once. Is this a train? How does it run? Why is it so fast? It's so comfortable in here. Why doesn't it shake at all? Such things made Yang Song very annoyed, so he had to send Xiaojuan to explore on this train, to explore those new things. When they heard that they were going to explore on the train, the two children immediately expressed their excitement to participate, and Xiaojuan stayed to accompany him. So this is the scene just now. The train followed the established track, clang clang rushing forward, carrying the most distinguished family of Xia Kingdom, with cheerful laughter and novelty, and heading towards the distance unswervingly. End of this chapter. Thank you very much for reaching the end. Don't forget to like. Looking for more exclusive content and immediate access? Subscribe to our Patreon. Remember, every like, subscription, or donation encourages us to continue. Thanks to everyone. See you in the next video.